Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Heavy Metallurgy with myself, Alan, and also we'd like to welcome Brian Arkham to the discussion tonight. I put a link in the description to his YouTube channel. You should definitely go check it out. He shows a bunch of cool collection updates, talks about music, and is also involved with the Saturday Slay streaming team as well. So
the name is a work in progress.
Why?
I don't think anyone's married to that, but that's what we're going with.
Oh,
thank
fun.
you.
Good deal. Good to have you with us tonight, Brian. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Yep, we're excited to have you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Marty, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, Brian wanted to discuss favorite Roadrunner records titles from. They have quite a long and complex history, which thankfully Alan knows a lot more about than any of us. Other than I used to buy a lot of it. So, Alan,
this is what they call throwing somebody under the bus.
That's right, throw the bus. The bus is the wheels on the bus go around and round over Alan's head. Yes,
or it's a segue.
Yep, but yeah, Roadrunner is definitely a label name that folks are familiar with, whether you've only been into metal for a handful of years or whether you're an old timer. Roadrunner's always been a very prominent label name. There's no way you have put together a heavy metal collection without having a bunch of titles with the Roadrunner logo on your shelf. It's always got those iconic capital R's at the beginning and end in the red box and the white font. That said, the Roadrunner catalog is very massive, but it is also very complicated. When Brian picked this topic, it's like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's a great one. And I'll shut up here in a minute or two and let Brian explain why he picked it. But when all three of us started looking at, okay, how do we put together a list of some favorites from Roadrunner, you quickly run into some weird complicating factors. One thing, of course, is just the sheer size of the catalog, because the label's been around since the mid-'80s. So there's a ton of titles to dig through. Second problem you dig into is that a lot of the stuff on Roadrunner was actually licensed from other labels. Roadrunner was, a Dutch company, and so they licensed the hell out of the catalogs of every American label, British label, Canadian label, and all these other labels. Roadrunner just would license their stuff for distribution through a lot of mainland Europe. So you'll find a ton of records that you think are on Roadrunner, but when you look more closely, it's like, oh, that was actually on Par Records in the US, and Roadrunner just licensed it so they could sell it in the Netherlands and places like that. So finding which bands were actually true Roadrunner signings that were original to their label, you have to pick through very carefully. Now, I think we've all tried our best to stick to those kind of things, but we'll inevitably probably have some titles that were licensed or co-released. Roadrunner also did things later in years where they would co-issue labels. So like it might be issued on Relativity Records in the US and then simultaneously released in Europe on the Roadrunner label. But that's not all. You also have several sub-labels with Roadrunner. The two famous ones that most people are going to identify with right away are Road Racer and RC. Road Racer looks very similar. Again, it's got the capital R at the beginning and end of the name. The logo is kind of the same rectangular box, but again, it's kind of a subsidiary within Roadrunner. Roadrunner was the parent company, but it did have a bunch of little subdivisions within it. As best I can tell, and I've been poking around on it for a while, by the way, a really good reference for some of this stuff, I already posted it in the chat for folks, is to go over to the Corrosium website and go into their label discographies. They've got a really nice extended entry for Roadrunner and its subsidiaries. But Road Racer, the short version is, Road Racer was originally used as the label for releasing things that were signed and released for the US market. So things would come out on Roadrunner in Europe, and Roadrunner would put them on their Road Racer imprint in the US. And they did that for several years in the mid and late 80s. But as you got into the later 80s, Around 88, they started changing that. They started putting the European releases on Road Racer / Roadrunner, and the pressings that were meant to be put out in the US would put on the RC Records subsidiary. And then by the early 90s, I think it's like 92, 93 or so, they just got rid of all that other stuff and just kind of brought it all back to the mothership and started putting everything out just under the name Roadrunner. So yeah, it can be pretty confusing that you'll see these labels that when you look at the logo, they're obviously connected somehow, but it's not always easy to figure it out. And what I just went through is the very short version. There are some other little complicating factors that go along with it. A couple of other just tidbits about the label are, one, their numbering system is backwards. They actually start with a high number. Like the first thing on Roadrunner is labeled like 99999, and then the numbers walk down from there, which is really weird. Another thing is that all their early issues, like the first 42 or so titles, they're not heavy metal titles. They're combinations of punk titles and just different underground music stuff. It wasn't until about the 42nd or 43rd release that you had a heavy metal title show up on Roadrunner. So if somebody was insane and wanted to be a completist and own the whole catalog, those first 42 that you have to buy are not even heavy metal records. The first metal thing they put out was a licensing deal for releasing the second Gaskin album. I think it's called No Way Out. And that was licensed from one of the British labels that had Gaskin signed to them. So again, there's a lot of just weird little quirks that go into Roadrunner, which kind of begs the question, Brian, why did you want to talk about Roadrunner records so much?
Well, it's actually coming up in the chat quite a bit. People seeing that logo and immediately kind of matching it with that quality, similar to I guess what happened with Metal Blade and Combat before in the 80s. So when I was early 90s, I was a teenager starting to get into heavy metal through Metallica and Slayer and Megadeth, Headbangers Ball.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I could ride my bike to the mall, and the mall had, 3 or 4 music stores at the time, Musicland or Camelot or Sam Goody.
Camelot rules them all.
Camelot was great. My mall had one of those. So yeah, you ride your bike there and, you spend your allowance on, whatever you could find. And in my area, the music stores just would carry a lot of Roadrunner releases. And so as I got into the heavier stuff, that's kind of what I would gravitate toward. And a lot of my entry points to death metal and thrash were through, either Road Racer or Road or RC or Roadrunner. And so I just thought it'd be a interesting topic, similar to what you guys did with Matt, with the Dark Path and Century Media. And so that's kind of why that popped in my head. I thought it was something that I could kind of relate to, and it definitely, was important to me and me getting into that exploration of the more extreme stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you make, Brian. Roadrunner titles, whether it was Road Racer, Roadrunner, or RC, they were readily available in a lot of bigger chain stores in the U.S. So they were easy things to find compared to a lot of other labels. Metal Blade titles were easy to find. Roadrunner was easy to find. But even by the late 90s, Combat releases could be a little hit or miss. Noise releases, unless it was something very big like Halloween, a lot of times you didn't find many of the noise bands in those same kind of stores.
Camelot in my town had a pretty good run of the Combat and the Noise as well.
Okay. See, here in the South, they did not have the noise titles unless again it was the really big selling ones. You would never see anything like a Running Wild or a Gravedigger title ever.
Running Wild, Gravedigger not so much, but I remember finding Coroner's R.I.P. in a $1 cutout bin in Camelot Music. They would. Nice. It seems like a lot of that stuff would get in, find their way to a cutout bin. I don't know. It's just really weird how that stuff trickled overseas like that. And Camelot we had Camelot and Tape World, And Tape World, I don't even know why they were there. They tend to be more expensive. They had a really crappy metal section, if they even had one. And Camelot just ruled the roost on all that stuff. They seemed to get all this stuff at the time that I was looking for.
Yep.
And Road Racer, RC, that stuff came into my wheelhouse way early on, and before Roadrunner, I even knew what Roadrunner was. So, I mean, like picking for this thing, it's 98% of my stuff is the early, the RC and the Road Racer. So, yeah, similar for me with Brian. I mean, I would get my allowance, get dropped off at the mall. My mom be shopping at Prangies or whatever, and I'd run over to Camelot and we have enough money to buy 2 tapes.
Yep.
Definitely. One of the other big kind of ways that I would get music at, in the early 90s and into the mid 90s was the music clubs, the Columbia House and the DMG. And they both had, I mean, as I was going through, I found quite a few that I got from Columbia House or BMG that were Roadrunner releases.
Really?
That was another.
Right. Yep. I had forgotten about that, but yeah, I actually, one of the things I picked tonight, I got in one of those, 10 CDs for $1 kind of promotions. And actually, I know my friend and I both filled it out at the same time, and we kind of picked the same 10 titles because we wanted the same stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the catalog numbers, and then you get screwed on the back end, but.
Yeah, you had to unsubscribe pretty fast by snail mail back then.
Yes. Definitely.
But yeah, their stuff was, they had a lot of releases. They had some very high profile releases. I'm sure we'll talk about some of those tonight. And yeah, they were accessible. They were stuff that you could find. So there's anybody who was banging their head a lot back in those days, definitely picked up a lot of stuff. And as some folks are mentioning, in the chat already, there are a lot of bigger named metal bands from, sort of the current recent years that are still, been affiliated with Roadrunner if they're not still affiliated with them. So, I mean, they've still...
I thought Roadrunner was dead. Are they not dead?
It seems like they're kind of dead. I mean, they've been swallowed by multiple companies, over... So there was a point where they're like, a subdivision of Warner, which is a subdivision of Sony, which was a subdivision of blah, 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 blah.
I think even Century Media is a subdivision of Sony nowadays, aren't they?
Yeah. So it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with them. But yeah, even some of the, they're not the kind of bands necessarily that we often talk about on these streams. But yeah, some of the bigger name acts that are still up and going now among, the younger generation of heavy metal bands, they've had ties to Roadrunners at least at one point in their career.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, we might as well get started, Brian. You're going to start off the festivities here tonight.
Okay. We're going to start with 1992. This was probably the first death metal band I got into. And it is Obituary with The End Complete on RC Records. So I remember seeing the video for the title track on Headbangers Ball. For a while, they did this segment called Into the Pit, which is like the last half hour. They would do the more extreme stuff. So I saw the music video for this, and I was just kind of floored by it. This is their third album. Obviously, it follows Cause of Death, which is a classic. Alan West returns on. Well, there you go. He replaces James Murphy, or he's back in the band. He was the original lead guitarist. But yeah, the first thing that grabbed me was the guitar tone on this. Just so thick, so powerful. And then, of course, John Tardy's vocals were like nothing I'd ever heard before. That scream into the guttural, growl. It's very recognizable. And he still sounds good. I mean, Jesus, like what, 30 years later, and he's still putting out music. It's pretty amazing. And I know. I gravitate to this one because it was the first I heard. I do recognize that Cause of Death is probably better, but for some reason I like this one. This is my favorite.
That one always kind of struck me as them trying to do Cause of Death Part 2, but the songs weren't as good.
The songs were definitely not as good if you take them individually. Or I'm sorry, as an album. There are some pretty boring songs on here. I won't deny that. But there are some great songs. I'm in Pain, Back to One's a great song. Dead Silence, In the End of Life and Sickness are kind of boring. Just a little redundant. Not really much going on, but the song "Corrosive" I think is one of their best. I love the atmosphere. I love the cover art. I had a 36 by 24 poster of this that I got at a record store when I was in high school and had it on my wall.
Nice.
Moved it a couple of times and then, eventually threw it away. I wish I didn't, but so yeah, this was a big one for me. Definitely Obituary was one of those kind of entry level death metal bands. Obviously, you could get into them. They chugged along enough that it was accessible to fledgling death metal fans, So that's my entry point into Roadrunner, RC.
We'll just go with Roadrunner tonight and keep it simple.
Yeah. So that's it. That's the one. And I love Alan West's lead guitar work. I don't know what it is about him. I just prefer him on all the Obituary stuff. I know James Murphy's an amazing guitarist, but there's something about Alan West's lead guitar work that just blows me away. I just love it. So that's my first one.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And yeah, I mean, I think Obituary is one of those signature bands. So yeah, that's a classic Roadrunner signing for sure.
Alan.
All right. Well, I think Incomplete may have been the first Obituary I also heard, but for my favorite, I'm going to go back with the first one. I've got the little 2-on-1 series
Two
thing.
from the vault.
Yeah, the 2 from the vault. But if I'm going to pick one from the vault, I'm going to pick Slowly We Rot pretty much every time. I know this one's a little more primitive and rough around the edges than Cause of Death, but this is the one that really floored me when I first checked it out. It's got that slower, very almost pseudo doomy aura about it that really clicks with me. I really like that style of death metal. They're not just blasting out of control. They're not focused on trying to blast beat and stuff like that. They're really taking their time. They're letting it develop that really sinister crawl, and that's my kind of death metal. I like that one a lot. Cause of Death also, of course, is excellent. This one, it's cleaned up more. Obviously, it's got Gunslinger for Hire, James Murphy on guitar. Nothing at all wrong with that album. I just don't find myself reaching for it as much. If I want to hear Obituary, I want to hear that really almost more sludgy kind of sound that they really nailed to perfection on the first album. And to y'all's point about Incomplete and such, I remember reading a quote one time in something that was discussing Obituary. I forget where right now, but it made the point that by Obituary wasn't the only band having a few hiccups by the time they got to their third album right there in sort of that 92, 93 era. And they the person writing kind of made the point, like, these bands were struggling in a way because they'd already done a couple of albums and their original goal was to be as extreme as possible. So after you've done that a couple of times, where do you go? So like Marty, your point about it sounding a little bit like, Cause of Death Part 2. Yeah. It kind of rings true. It's like, well, you've already done that. How are you going to make this, more extreme, more crazy, more over the top? You may not be able to. And as such, you may end up starting to tread water pretty quickly, which is what it felt like some bands started to do as you got into that segment. After you got through that first wave of great releases, some of those bands had trouble finding a way to kind of keep the momentum going in a way. But yeah, for me, Obituary's awesome pick, Brian, but I'll take Slowly We Rot.
On the Obituary trip, I'm just gonna. For me, this was the first one I heard. I quickly picked up Slowly We Rot after it, and once I heard the news that there was very few lyrics on that album, it was just a bunch of scatting essentially. That bothered the shit out. I don't know why it bothered me so much. It just bothered me the fact that someone was so lazy that they couldn't write lyrics. I mean,
or so extreme that they didn't write lyrics.
No, it's lazy. It's got to be lazy. But
lyrics, we don't need no stinking lyrics.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably a joke at the time. I don't know, and it just kind of stuck. But it just seems like Cause of Death is kind of. I mean, that's my favorite album by Obituary because they always seem to me like a parody of themselves or trying to rewrite the same album over and over and over. But on Cause of Death, they refined their sound. They got a much better production, a lot more tasteful guitar solos, obviously because of Murphy in the band. But anyway, the whole RC Roadrunner thing didn't really start for me, and it started for me earlier in the thrash era. That's where I got my teeth locked into the RC catalog, and it was a big deal. I mean, Roadrunner, Road Racer, RC, whatever you want to. For me, that was a thrash label, and it was a great thrash label. Looking back on it now, it is quite amazing how they kind of had their finger on the pulse of what was happening in extreme metal, because they really rode with the times really well early on through the the transition of heavy metal to thrash, from thrash to death. Obviously, money, you can tell when a label is successful by how much they reissue and the bigger caliber of the bands that they take on, because they've got more money to throw around. I mean, I had to look at the pile and said, am I going to show my Nickelback CDs tonight? Am I going to show my Cold Chamber tonight? Am I going to show Depeche Mode, which I don't mind Depeche Mode, let's be honest. But
in other news, Brian will be joining me as new co-host starting next week, while Marty enjoys his Cold Chamber connection. So it's been nice knowing you, Marty.
I might be disappointing you too by the end of the night. You never know.
But
it's going to be lonely.
I'll kick it back to my roots, and I'll start off.
Beautiful.
Merciful Fate, which ended up being on Roadrunner down the road later. For me, Merciful Fate was always a combat band. Both of my pressings are on combat. My CDs are on combat. But when this album came out, it was an RC, a Road Racer album. And this, to me, is the third. I've said this. The thing that's funny is a lot of the shit I'm showing tonight I've shown on my channel in these streams a million times. So it's probably pretty easy to go through this stuff. But this, to me, is the third Merciful Fate album, for the fact that King wrote most of the stuff for the intention of being Merciful Fate. And the best band photo ever. I mean, look how evil his hand looks, like it's disembodied, like a disembodied spirit or something. It looks large and deformed, like it's turning into a hoof or something. I don't know, but the best band photo ever. But this is my favorite King Diamond album. It would have been probably my second favorite Merciful Fate album. I don't know, but there's just something about this that enchanted me, and anything that came up on the road. Was this the first Road Racer release I got? I can't remember, to be completely honest. It's a blur at this point, but something this good comes out on a label. There's no internet to source. So what do you got to do? You have to pick up stuff that's on the same record labels. You go and you look for that logo, and if it's there, if the cover seems to fit the bill, it's coming home with you, And this started off, the King Diamond is a good cross section of heavy metal and some thrash here and there. I mean, it's a perfect band for the label at that time, as far as I'm concerned, is in the label's evolution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Merciful Fate and then subsequently King Diamond, that was definitely, sort of the early big score for Roadrunner among their original signings. That was something that was their band, and others had to license it from them for a change. So that obviously was a big boon to their early roster, and helped a lot with their early success getting their own roster established. So
definitely
lots of comments from that, obviously.
Brian is up next. Sorry.
Okay. So my second pick was Suffocation's Breeding the Spawn. I was visiting an aunt one time, and she had she brought over her other nephew on her husband's side to kind of hang out with me, and we were hanging out at his house, and he played me this album, D-Sides Legion, and Masters on the Seventh Day Creative Master. So that was kind of like an excellent trifecta to get into death metal, in 1993. I never heard anything like this. This is, their second full length. They put out that EP, Human Waste, on Relapse, and then Effigy of the Forgotten came out on Roadrunner. They sounded almost night and day. I'm pretty sure that was a Scott Burns Morris sound. Effigy was Scott Burns and Morris sound, so it had that, that death metal production that was so popular then, that every band was doing. So on their second full length, I think the band wanted to go back to Tampa to record there, but the label said, no, we're going to keep you local. And so they sent them somewhere in New York. And what you get is this, which is good, but the production on it is just awful.
It is good music, totally neutered by the production.
Yes. It's so thick, and if you have this on in the car, you can't really hear anything. You almost have to listen to it with headphones on to be able to get any real enjoyment out of it. But if you can cut through all the production problems, it really is. These songs are really, really great, and it's just so muddy. Everything's buried, and for Pierce from Within, they go back to more sound. It sounds great, Scott Burns. And there is I think there's a version of this on YouTube that I was actually listening to this week. It sounds a lot better. I don't know who mixed it or what the story is behind that, but some of these songs they have since. In fact, I think on Pierce from Within they started re-recording these and releasing them at the tail end of every full length since then, because it was just garbage. So I still think some of these songs are the best, especially Prelude to Repulsion. Poor Frank Mullins sounds great on it. I mean, he does a good job. I kind of felt sorry for him because they give him a million lines of lyrics to belt out. It's amazing. If you try and read along, he stops and starts at weird spots. He'll say half of a word, and then there'll be a breakdown, and he'll finish the other half. It's just I feel kind of bad for him.
Yeah. See, Obituary had the right idea. No lyrics.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But at least there are lyrics.
Too many lyrics on this. But Seagrave cover, I always thought was really cool. Again, it's another one of those entry level death metal releases that I really love, even though it's kind of bad, Not the songs are bad, the production's bad, but yeah, this is Breeding Spawn, Suffocation, 93.
This one was my jam. This is the first one I heard.
Oh yeah, that was great too.
And eternal classic, great production, hard hitting. I mean, the birth of slam.
Yep.
Kind of. Yep.
The thing that really killed it for me with Suffocation for a long time was the fact that they were often imitated, and there were so many bands trying to pull from that New York slam death metal style that it kind of soured the originators for me a little bit. But I've come back around on it where I don't think that anymore. What were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
Oh, that sound got very oversaturated very fast.
It was quick
with the Suffocation clones. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Well, here's the other thing is Mike Smith and Terrence Hobbs. At the time, I thought metal was just for white dudes, and I opened this up, and he's probably the best guy in the band.
That's why he's out front. He's a fucking badass on drums, man. Crushing. And
Terrence Hobbs has, been with him for. I mean, he's the founding member. He's the only original left. His riffs are amazing. So that was pretty groundbreaking, at least for me. Because it was just a little bit different.
Okay, Alan.
Yeah. Marty's already brought up the King Diamond part of the catalog, so got to cover those bases as well. For me, this is one of those immortal albums.
Immortal.
Top. It's always kind of silly to try to say top 10 or top 25, whatever, but this would be. There's just no doubt about it. Melissa was great. I love several of the songs on Melissa, but I own one copy of Melissa. I own 3 copies of this album, and I play all 3 of them from time to time. They really were, just at the height of their powers with Don't Break the Oath. Everything from the packaging, the track list is almost flawless. This was one of those albums. I remember very distinctly the first time I heard this. I had found the picture disc of it in a local used shop for a good price. At that point I knew a lot of King Diamond's records, but I really hadn't heard any of the early Merciful Fate stuff. So, I bought that, took it back, and just, within the first few seconds, that first, little guitar part of A Dangerous Meeting kicks in. I could just feel the fucking hairs on my arms standing up. I'm just like, oh shit, this is going to be good. And it's good. And, it's, again, it can't be understated how important, the Merciful Fate signing and then the subsequent King Diamond catalog was to establishing Roadrunner as a commodity that a lot of other labels around the world wanted to interact with. We want these distributed in our territories. We want them in our shops. It was a big signing and big releases for them back then. So, always got to shout out Don't Break the Oath. If it applies to a topic, it's got to be mentioned. It's just one of those central releases that can never be forgotten.
Can actually hold up that cover, Alan.
Sure.
I mean, iconic image. I mean, the most iconic metal album cover ever. It's like he's beckoning, calling to something. Then I kind of put together, they're still in the flames. Is he calling to, is this Molly? I can't remember the storyline, but obviously he's calling to a witch. I always kind of put the two together. Wonder if this was all self-conscious or if it was, a happy accident, but, went from flames to flames, and the devil is beckoning the witch to come closer, or, come into the Sabbath. And I don't know. I might be thinking a little too much of this, but
I've noted the color schemes, are very similar. That's very noticeable that the color schemes are alike. And King obviously, loves his storytelling elements. There could have been something to that. I don't know. But that's one of the things that's nice about those covers too. They let your imagination run wild when you look at a cover like this. Is this? I have no idea. Is this demon like sentencing someone to damnation? Is he making a deal with somebody? Is he warning somebody off? Is it the stay away, white magician? Get the fuck out of here. You're not wanted. You are not welcome in our land, kind of thing. You can take it any way you want to. That's one of the things that makes it great. It's simple. You can interpret it 5 million ways, and you can't stop staring at it.
Yep.
So,
all right.
All right, Brian. Marty.
I am going to harp and shout from the mountaintops yet again of the greatness of Holy Terror.
Oh! I did not realize Holy Terror.
Oh yeah, Road Racer.
It's a Road Racer. Yeah.
Mine Wars.
RC and Road Racer. Mine Wars was my first. This is another one of those albums. I bought it on tape. Put it in the vehicle tape deck. Every hair on my back of my neck stood up. Absolutely over the top, crushing, high octane, cocaine out thrash metal. Both a lot of class and a lot of sophisticated riffs. And Keith Dean, rest in peace, the vocalist. I don't know how he did it, but he made this, over the top attack melodious. He put in his unique singing style and actually found some harmonies in there to sing over the top of this blazing material. I mean, this album is a little more subdued, but it's still just as good. This was an absolutely great, sadly overlooked band.
Yep.
Absolutely influential in my musical development. And, top tier thrash from the 80s. This came out in 88, year before I graduated. This was, well, they said both of them say 1988, which I don't know why that is. I can't believe they put out 2 albums in 1 year, but it could have been when they were licensed. I don't know.
There's a couple of years in between them. Yeah. I'll check for you real quick. Let's see. Terran Submission was 1 year in between. 87 on Terror and 88 on Mind Wars.
Right on.
I was thinking that Mind Wars was 89. My mistake.
Crucial thrash. If you've never heard it,
yeah,
if you're sick of hearing me go on and on about it, Find out what the hype's about. Pick those albums up. They are both chef's kiss to the heavens. Perfect.
They really are. The if folks aren't familiar with them and just need a little reference point to poke you to get you off your ass and listen to them, the first one at least, actually I guess both of them, one of the Agent Steel guitarists. That's where he landed after Skeptic's Apocalypse. So yeah, take that it's in that direction and that kind of level of quality as well. Both of them excellent albums. I always like the first one better than the second one myself. I know a lot of people prefer Mind Wars. Mind Wars is more over the top. For me, some of the songs get so over the top and so dense with the lyrics. Again, back to too many lyrics. That the songs get very thick. On the first album, they don't do that quite as bad. And just the hooks on the first album all the way through it, even though it's just this intense, speedy, ripping thrash, those songs are so damn catchy. They don't just whiz by and don't stick. Those songs will hook you good on Terror.
Yet you love Dreamweaver.
Dreamweaver, the album, that one does start to have some of the lyric problem though too. That is fair to say on that one.
He does a great job managing it, but I'm just saying, wow.
Yep.
Talking about a lot of shit to say.
Martin is rather verbose.
Yes, he was.
Have you guys heard the spin-off project from the guitarist Mike Alford? I think it's called Mind Wars.
I've heard about it, but I have not listened to it.
What's this now? What?
The guitarist on those Holy Terror albums, he's got a new project called Mind Wars. Well, I guess it's not new.
Mike Alford?
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah, check it out. I just remember that because I got a CD like in a blind bag or something, and it was Mind Wars, and looking into it, it was his new band.
Learn something good every day. Is it good?
It's okay. I mean, it's not Holy Terror, but it's decent enough. Thrash.
Well, he's only working with 1/5 of the equation.
Right. Yeah.
And if you take Keith Dean away,
mm-hmm.
It's not the same. But
yeah.
All right.
Worth checking out. Okay. We've already talked a little bit about James Murphy, so I thought I should bring up his kind of, that's small, huh? Disincarnate, staying in 1993, Dreams of the Carrying Kind.
Doesn't matter how big it is, it's the power behind the music, Brian.
Yeah.
Sorry. Dad joke.
What? So, yeah, I mean, he was on a lot of crucial death metal albums. We talked about Cause of Death. He was also on Death Spiritual Healing. He was on a Cancer album. The Session Guy. And this is kind of where he was allowed to try and find a home, try at least. They only put out this one album. And then, it I don't know if it didn't sell well. I mean, at the time, I know I saw enough of it in the metal magazines for, advertising it. But I still think it's pretty good. It's pretty good death metal album. Still got that old school 90s sound. Again, it was pretty sure it was another Morris Sound studio release. Oh no, you know what? It wasn't. This is Colin Richardson produced this. But it's definitely, got that James Murphy sound, kind of progressive, definitely technical. This definitely allowed him to explore those elements. It's also got a little bit of a doom feel to it here and there. In fact, I think Aaron from My Dang Bride does guest vocals on one of these songs. A good bit of atmospheric, with acoustic guitars and some keyboards and synth work. The vocals on it are a little bit, I don't know, monotone, kind of ordinary. If I had one complaint about this one, it'd be the vocals. It's not that great. Supposedly he's reformed with a few of the members and are working on maybe a follow up. But yeah, re-listening to this week, definitely gave me a renewed appreciation of it. It's still pretty solid, 90s death metal album.
I haven't spun that tape in a long time. Long time.
Yeah, that's a good pick, Brian. I hadn't thought of that album in ages even.
Okay, Alan.
All right. Marty's mentioned a couple of times that, Roadrunner, had a really fantastic thrash roster at times. And some of those bands were so fast, they give you whiplash.
Oh.
This is always, I know I've shown this in other streams, this is always the whiplash album I reach for. Nothing wrong with the other ones, but Ticket to Mayhem is the one I just love. Horrible cover art aside, once again, let's check this out. Who the hell signed off on this art project? I mean, somebody not only thought of this and constructed it using, crayons and glue, but somebody signed off on this and let it go through. And that's an unforgivable sin right there.
Some artist got paid for that.
Probably not very much. But it is a classic ripper in the speed thrash
Great
category. Last Nail in the Coffin. The Burning of Atlanta is just one of my personal anthems. So they can play that at my funeral. Incredible song, blisteringly fast. They part of, I guess, the coverage, they did, have, a little bit of that, cartoony humor about their thrash, that it was, relatively popular among bands as you got into the later 80s. It was never my favorite ingredient in thrash bands. I didn't mind it in small doses. And Whiplash was pretty good at not overdoing it, except in the graphics. But just another one of those examples of, excellent thrash signing on Roadrunner, band that never really quite got their due. They very much got lost in the mass of thrash bands by the time they were getting out there, but they did get out there. This is the kind of thing too that, by modern standards, there's a little disconnect for myself and maybe others from my generation. This is the kind of album that we would pick up for $3 in a used bin or a cutout bin. And didn't really ever, it was like, hey, yeah, great record. And you don't really think about it very much. And you go and look and try to buy these things today, and it's insane. Somebody had a copy of Power and Pain recently for says like, oh, I had that album years ago. I haven't thought of it in ages. How much is it? It's $100. Just like, okay, that is not coming home with me. I'll go pull it up on YouTube and have some fond memories. There you go. Marty's showing off the Benjamins tonight.
$1.99 when people did not give a shit about vinyl anymore.
I paid $3 for mine, so you got the better deal than I did.
$3?
I paid $3 for Power and Pain in a used store in Lubbock, Texas in the fall of 1996.
That's awesome.
Gotta tell you though, man, these were just great I mean, this was the first one I heard too, and probably my favorite of the two, but there's no denying how ripping this album is, and just straight ahead, great East Coast thrash. Awesome stuff for sure. That brings me up here. Where are we going? You know what? I don't remember where these guys were from off the top of my head, but Blessed Death, Destined for Extinction, just came out on Road Racer. This album blew me away as a more turbocharged version of Slayer with the most over-the-top vocals by a Larry Portelli? Yep, Portelli. These guys look like they're ready to fight. They're standing on the rubble of your destroyed civilization after they play your town. This guy probably buys miners beer and smokes. But man, what an absolutely great, underrated thrash album from what year did this come out? This came out 87. The most over-the-top thrash vocals you've ever heard. If you've never heard Blessed Death, check out Destined for Extinction. Totally raging, well-written music. Insane to the point of being laughable. I mean, in a good way, funny. This totally crazy vocal performance. Check it out. Trust me on this one. It's crazy.
Very
New Jersey, they might be from New Jersey. That sounds about right, actually.
I don't know that band. It's a new one. I got to add it to my list here.
Blessed Death. They have 2 albums. No, they had a third thing that came out. I don't know if it was. I think it was a mini album. But
nice.
Brian is up next.
Okay. staying in '93. This is my sweet spot here. And third album by Malevolent Creation, Stillborn. I picked this up at a Best Buy, and I remember I think my dad bought it for me, and I did it based on the cover, the Seagrave cover. You know, I think I spent 45 minutes kind of going through the bins, looking for the coolest cover, and this is what I came up with. Not the greatest death metal album of all time. Malevolent was, but they were more on the thrashy side of things. They're still putting out decent music these days. This one is not considered a classic compared to the first two, obviously.
I've never heard that album.
Well, you're not really missing that much, honestly. But, back then you got it. And this is probably the only thing you're going to get for the next couple weeks. So you listen to it until you like it, kind of thing. Remember?
Oh yeah.
It wasn't like nowadays where you just flick to something new on YouTube.
Yep.
This was in the CD player. But it's got some good songs on it. John Rubin from Monstrosity plays on this album. This is the last one with Brett Hoffman on vocals for a little while. I think Rob Barrett had left by this point to go play with Cannibal Corpse. But it's got some. They decided to add a little bit more melody on some of these songs. Dominated Resurgency is pretty good track. The title track's good. It did get a lot of negative reviews. I don't think it sold that well. I think they got dropped from Roadrunner after this. And again, I think they wanted to go back to Scott Burns and more sound. Roadrunner wouldn't go for it, so they sent them somewhere else. So it definitely it's a grower, I'll say that. But it was important to at least my ears at the time. Pretty extreme, and there's some decent songs on here. So yeah, if you've only heard the first two, I definitely think this one it's got some redeeming qualities. I'll leave it at that.
Right on.
Yeah, I always kind of thought Malevolent Creation was a little better than people gave him credit for. That was very much, I thought, a little bit of a case where the scene was just very, very saturated.
Exactly.
At that point. I know at least where I was at locally in the Midwest at the time, people could not get past Cannibal Corpse. It was all Cannibal all the time.
Yep.
And people just were not checking out the others. Just like, this Malevolent Creation one's worth a listen to. This, Masters album. And it just, folks were so locked in on, Cannibal because of the, the graphics, the imagery as much as anything.
The song lyrics. Absolutely.
Yeah. It was the most over the top one. And, so that people fixated on that. And Cannibal was never, a huge band for me personally. So I was like, I was, buying all these other ones. Always like, hey, anybody check out Benediction? Benediction, anybody? Hey, Dark is the Season, kind of not half bad. Just look at your fucking Cannibal Corpse record. I don't care.
Well, Cannibal Corpse is another one I would see everywhere. I mean, I'd go in and they would have, almost all their titles. But I never saw a Benediction album where I lived in Central Illinois at Best Buy or Musicland or even the local shop. They just didn't carry them.
The only one that turned up for me was Transcend the Rubicon. And that was their best album as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Hard to argue with that.
Okay. Alan.
All right. Let's see here. Let's... we're doing a lot of sort of the deathy and thrashy ones. Another one I've talked about recently, but it fits the bill, so it deserves a shout out. Another excellent thrash one. I guess this band was a little closer to home for the label too, but Artillery's By Inheritance was a Roadrunner signing, and one of the real unsung classics of thrash. They had a pretty unique sound for a thrash band. They did not sound like anybody else at a time when thrash bands were getting a little too homogenous for their own good. And this album in particular, the songs are just really killer. They've got very spiteful sound, really thoughtful lyrics, though. So if we're doing the lyrics tonight, this one doesn't have too few and it doesn't have too many. This is the Goldilocks. It's just right. And yeah, it is a really good album, and it's just criminally underrated. The band is still around and going, but
they've changed a lot. They've changed.
Yeah, they've got it's different lineup. I've heard bits and pieces from more recent albums, and it's almost closer to power metal these days with
kind
thrash,
of underwhelming. Yeah.
Overprintings. Yeah, it doesn't really hit the mark much anymore. But hey, it's been 30 years. It's hard to keep the original spark. But yeah, a lot of people, this is one of those bands that people are like, oh, I've heard that name, but I never listened to. This is your homework for the night. By Inheritance. It is a badass album. Just tracks like Bomb Food, the title track. Lots of bands did these songs, with soldiers and war and all that stuff. Bomb Food. The name says it all. You think it's glorious going to war and being a soldier and playing G.I. Joe. You're nothing but fucking bomb food, dumbass. They really just hit you right in the face with the message. It's very impactful. So yeah, really, really strong thrash.
I was going to pick By Inheritance, but I went with the Terror Squad, Fear of Tomorrow. Fear of Tomorrow is great. As far as I'm just one of my favorites by them for sure. But
excellent cover. I love the cover art on Fear of Tomorrow.
Totally cool. I am up next.
Right. You're up, Marty.
Well, let's go with the second Carnivore album, Retaliation.
Yeah.
This is often misunderstood, but killer crossover album. Holy shit. It introduced Road Racer 2. This band is what I think wasn't Typo Negative Roadrunner's first gold record. Bloody Kisses.
Bloody Kisses.
I think that's right. I can't swear to it, but yeah, it was definitely one of their big breakthrough albums.
So this is, a prime example of a record label nurturing an artist. After Carnivore, this is their second and final album, and it's absolutely great. New York styled hardcore with more of a Black Sabbath-y stamp on it. I mean, Peter was a big Black Sabbath fan. It's got his bass tone and attitude stamped all over this album. He pioneered his sound very early on and carried it through with him to the end. And these are great songs, man. Great. And, songs like Jesus Hitler, Race War, a lot of people didn't read between the lines and classified these guys as racist, and it wasn't like that. But, Road Racer, Roadrunner nurtured this artist, and which ended up becoming one of their bigger selling artists with Typo Negative. So, but absolutely great album, Retaliation.
Yep. Carnivore, another one of those very seminal Roadrunner bands. Absolutely.
Okay. Brian.
All right. Staying in 93. I got Gorguts.
Nice.
The Erosion of Sanity.
Great.
Yeah, this is great. Second by them. Dan Seagrave art, obviously that draws me right in. Had the Roadrunner. No, this one was on RC. Yeah, I don't know. To me, Gorguts was always one of those really unique death metal bands. Really didn't sound like anyone else. Had their own style. I think the band added a little more technicality on this one than the first. Obviously headed in that direction after this and beyond. Luke LeMay has one of those really immediately recognizable voices or growls in death metal. A lot of great tracks on here, especially Condemned to Obscurity was always one of my favorites. It's really like churning and almost like labyrinthine, really made it interesting and fun to listen to. You could listen to this 3 or 4 times and find, little things you missed the time before. It was so deep, very, very layered, very textured. Obviously excellent musicianship, technicality, all the instruments, sound great on this. I did not get much into the two after this. That was a little bit over my head with Obscura and From Wisdom to Hate. However, I do like the new stuff that they're putting out with Colored Sands and Pleiades Dust. So love the old logo.
Yeah.
Classic, 90s death metal bands. That's just what I eat up,
Mm-hmm.
So this is a listenable reissue that I got last year. Great one.
Very cool. Yeah, I always liked those Gorguts albums too. Something about them always stood out a little bit back then. I see a lot of folks, praising them too. Something that's worth noting though, those albums at that time, when those first two came out, Gorguts was very overlooked.
Yep.
They were completely lost in the crowd and they did not get noticed. Today, yes, Gorguts, is hailed as, this huge band, masters of technicality, and deservedly so.
Yep.
But yeah, when that second album came out, again, very few people gave even half a fuck about it. Not that it was bad. It's just
I liked it.
there were a few of the wise, who caught on to it. But most, it was not a good selling album. It did not get a lot of promotion. It didn't get a lot of airplay on even college radio. Again, it was, 15th in line between Cannibal Corpse, Deicide, Obituary, Cannibal Corpse, 6 Feet Under. It just, they did not get a whole lot of notice. And, they kind of went radio silent, for, a few years thereafter it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when Obscure came back, it was just like, oh, good. I'm glad that band didn't completely disappear after all. I hope things work out for them. I literally remember thinking that when I first saw the ads for Obscure. I'm just like,
good for them.
Maybe they'll get a better shake at it this time. And I think it played out okay. But yeah, it's funny because they're from today's perspective. Yeah, the early stuff, even those early first two albums, people hail them. So you're seeing comments like death metal perfection, all that.
Yeah.
Boy, at the time, I'd go in, and look. I remember it may have been a Camelot. It may have been a slightly, a Camelot knockoff, but they had a copy of the first one, Considered Dead, on tape, and they had it sitting there in the tape racks for so long. I would only get out to the stores maybe once every month or two because there was.
You know where you're going.
I was out in the sticks.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd see it there. I didn't pick it up. Like you always said, I've got enough. I've skipped lunch for enough days that I can buy 2 tapes, and that was never going to quite make the cut. But yeah, I go back, 4 months later, and you knew it was the same copy because the dust was building up on it thick enough you could literally write your initials on the plastic wrap of the cassette. Nobody, I'd look at him just like, it looks pretty cool, man, but I didn't skip lunch for 14 days to buy that when I can get that Trickster album's looking pretty sweet. We won't talk about that. We all make bad choices sometimes.
It seems to me like when that Considered Dead album came out that a lot of people thought they were a Florida band. It sounded very much like a Florida band. Wasn't it recorded at Morrisound? I don't remember.
It definitely was. The Erosion of Sanity was not, but
no, that one wasn't. But the
Considered
first
Dead
one had a very Florida sound to it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to bring up. People are mentioning this band in the chat. Sorrow.
Yeah.
Their Forgotten Sunrise debut, and then
Hatred and Disgust.
Disgust, and then of course you can't get by without showing the fourth member of the band here. This guy's penis.
You're hanging out.
In those cut off Daisy Dukes, which are always a good idea. I mean, it's summer; it's hot.
If you're Catherine Bach, it's the best thing in the world, and if you're not, don't do it.
those are just his keys from his pocket. That's all that is.
Keys to mysteries. Okay.
Keep it backstage.
Here we go, Alan. You're up.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's switch gears here a little bit. This is one of my favorite albums of all time, and it's completely unlike everything else we have talked about so far tonight. It is the first Solitude Eternus album. Was a Road Racer release, Into the Depths of Sorrow.
My favorite, WFAL. It's my favorite album by them.
The radio station you stole it from?
Falcon Radio in Northwest Ohio they had a heavy metal show on Friday and Saturday nights, 88.1 WBGU Metal Storm. And I haunted their fucking call-in line. I'm sure they got sick of that. That damn kid keeps calling in asking to hear more and more shit. He keeps messing up our Cannibal Corpse night. But yeah, they would occasionally dump CDs they weren't playing. Basically anything that wasn't Cannibal Corpse, they would dump them at one of the used shops in town. So if you could get there on the right day, right after that stuff got put out, you could make some good scores. And one day this was sitting there in the little $5 bin, and yeah, it's got all the radio signals written all over it. I don't care, because I had been looking for this album for a while at that time. Nobody had it locally, couldn't find a place to order it from. And it's a absolute classic of the doom metal genre completely. It's as good. I'll go out on a limb and say it's as good as anything Candlemass ever recorded. It's got that same style of doom about it, where it's very heavy, but it's also got this kind of almost classical neo sort of uplifting air about it at times. The music is rooted in traditional Iron Maiden style heavy metal, which it's got some gallops to it. It's got lead guitars. It's not just slow for the sake of slow. And the vocals on it, this is Rob Lowe at the height of his powers in his youth, really just haunting, beautiful melodies, amazing album. I remember Sue Knowles, not for Metal Maniacs, but I think she reviewed this for, it may have been her own zine, which was Manic Reaction, or it may have even been Sentinel Steel. Anyway, she reviewed this for one, and yeah, she really gravitated towards just the dude in the artwork really just says it all about the mood. This guy on his own, obviously lost in his own thoughts, which are not happy thoughts at the time, and it really just reflected the music really, really well. But again, it's not some medieval knight or something. It's a modern dude in jeans and a leather jacket sitting in these ruins, and it just really kind of combined the modern and the ethereal, old doom sounds in not only the music but in the artwork really nicely. And of course, Solitude Eternus had a really great run of records, but this one is hard to top. If you want that pure classic doom sound, you can't go wrong with this one. Not at all.
Right on. Great choice.
Yeah, Robert Lowe had such a great voice. Still does,
Yep.
One of the great U.S. vocalists.
All right. I'm still in the thrash realm. And
it's quite okay. It's a good place to be.
This band didn't really have a lot of staying power in my playing. I don't know, I'm drawing a blank. They didn't stay with me over the years, but
oh, nice.
They didn't stay in circulation, but back when I was a teenager, I listened to a lot of Atrophy. Socialized Hate debut in Violent by Nature. They broke up after the tour for Violent by Nature. A band, typical thrash. There's songs like Beer Bong, the silly thrash anthems, yet a lot of social and political anthems worked in, maybe a faster version of way more metal, but still has a spirit of crossover to it. I don't know. I always enjoyed these tapes a lot growing up, and that's when I tried to pick this list, I tried to gravitate towards things that were a big deal for me back then. And those guys were in there. From Arizona as well, along with Sacred Reich.
Sacred Reich, yeah. Sacred Reich was a big one for me, not on Roadrunner.
Oh, me too, man. Their first album in particular, Ignorance, crushes. I love that album.
Definitely.
Okay. Brian.
I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna go with a compilation, a Roadrunner compilation, At Death's Door 2.
Nice.
2. This is back when you got it. Oh, you got one.
I got one.
You got one. Very nice. This is my introduction to a ton of new bands. I'd heard of some of these, but the first track from Fear Factory, Martyr, they got a Brujeria song on here, Padre Nuestro, amazing. Song by Immolation, back when, this is the way that they were relatively cheap, and you got exposed to, this has 12 tracks. So 12 new death metal bands that you actually got to hear, not just read about, which was very, big for me. So I have a couple of these compilations that I have kept over the years. And this was great because it was an actual label compilation on Roadrunner. I got one from Relapse that I still listen to.
Yep.
But this is the first time I heard Suffocation's Prelude to Repulsion I talked about earlier. This version, though, is a demo, so it's a little bit cleaner than that album version on Bringing the Spawn. Also has a couple covers by Death and Malevolent Creation. Death does that cover of Kisses God of Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic cover. That song would later be put out on a reissue of the Human album, I believe. You mentioned Sorrow. There's a Sorrow song on here. Gorguts. There's a Cynic song. Disincarnate's on here. Atrocity. Band called Skin Chamber. I never really delved into. Have you heard of them?
I remember them being on some of those comps. I never dug into them either.
You got one? Oh, there. Wow. Very nice. So yeah, this compilation just lived in my car. It's kind of sad they don't really put these out. Well, I guess they do, but they're not as, I don't know, they're not as common. I would love.
There's no need for them anymore.
Right. I mean, everything's available on your phone or on your computer. I'm still trying to track down a copy of the first one, so it's on my list. I'll find it though.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good pick, Brian. And it's something I noticed about Roadrunner when digging through the discography, getting ready for our stream this week. Roadrunner didn't have quite as high a profile series of compilations that a lot of the other labels did back then. I mean, Metal Blade had Metal Massacre, and that was really a flagship part of the label early on. Shrapnel had the U.S. metal compilations. Relapse had the Death is Just the Beginning volumes that very widely circulated. Roadrunner had some good compilations, but they didn't seem to be like a mainstay of the label as much as the others, and I don't know why that was. If as a European label they just didn't grab onto the idea of compilations, or if it was because they were licensing a lot more bands than they were signing, and they didn't feel like they had as many bands they wanted to put out volume after volume of a series for. But they did some nice compilations, but it's not, the compilations on Roadrunner don't feel quite as crucial as they did for some of the other labels back then.
Well, maybe they didn't, because they kept bouncing around from genre to genre. They started thrash. I mean, I definitely have some traditional heavy metal picks, but then in the early 90s was pretty much all death metal, and then they dropped a lot of death metal bands and went on to the Cold Chambers and whatever else, the aggro thrash of stuff like Machine Head, and so maybe they just didn't stay in one niche long enough to put out a long stretch of compilations. They did
could be
at Death's Door 1 and 2, and that was it.
That's a possibility. Yeah, it would be funny to have at Death's Door and have it full of thrash bands on Volume 1, and have it full of death bands on Volume 2, and have it full of Cold Chamber on Volume 3. That would be a weird sequence.
Yeah, maybe that's a Noise Records thing to do, right?
Yeah, Metal Blade did it a little bit. Some of those later volumes of Metal Massacre are really, really different from what you heard on the early volumes. But that series was so long, it couldn't help but change.
It's funny, the Metal Massacre thing, I was super late to that. The best of Metal Blades Volume 1 and 2 and 3 were the ones that got me honed in on the Metal Blade roster. I totally missed the Metal Massacre stuff.
The best of volumes, those were very good. Once Metal Blade had sort of a bigger roster, was more established. But those were great volumes too.
Okay, Alan.
All right. So Brian mentioned earlier the fact that you could pick up a few Roadrunner things through the whole BMG back in the day. And if folks don't know what we're referencing there, back in our day when dinosaurs ruled the earth. In magazines, which was kind of like the internet, if you put it on paper, you could. They would have these advertisements from companies, and there was this mail order music thing, and they always had this big deal where you could get 10 CDs for 1 penny. They'd have like this huge print on their ads: 10 CDs for 1 cent.
Remember what that is? A penny.
That's it.
It's not a
And
Bitcoin.
You could just
yeah, the deal was, of course, you were supposed to, you had to sign up for like, a music sort of subscription service, and then you were obligated to buy, 2 CDs a month. And of course, the prices were jacked up a bit.
outrageous.
So that, the 10 CDs for the cent was really to try to draw you in there. If you were smart, if you were smart and paid attention, you could get the 10 CDs for a cent and immediately send in your your unsubscribe to me thing and weasel out of it. But you had to do it fast. And of course, most of the time it was, the 10 CDs for a penny list were just chock full of all, like the 3-year-old pop albums that nobody wanted to hear anymore. But if you dug through it long enough, you would find some more obscure stuff and some heavy stuff. And I found one on that list. This is where I got Heathen Victims of Deception for 1/10 of a penny.
You got that in the music club?
I got this in the music club about 1992.
That's a beautiful thing.
It made no sense that it existed. It was the only reason I did the 10 CDs for a penny scheme. I'm just like, yep, that's
well worth it.
I'm getting that. This is the second Heathen album. A lot of folks are a little more familiar with the debut, Breaking the Silence, which is a good album. It has some great tracks. It's as a full album, it's not a personal favorite, but it is good. But this album is an old favorite. They sound very, very good on this. Good production. One thing I always liked about it is the songs. They really take their time and develop the songs very nicely. They move at their own pace. They go fast when they need to, but they will slow down when they need to. Very mature songwriting. Great lyrical topics, exploring, problems with religion and society and stuff like that, but very well put together. It doesn't come across as cheesy. It doesn't come across as, youth punk, anarcho, burn it all down or anything. It's, a little more thoughtful than that. Really, really strong album. I do not know how many times I've played this album over the years. It's probably been in the hundreds. This is a funny backstory for it. And the reason I found out about Heathen, one of my buddies in high school, was one of the nicest things anybody ever did for me as a Christmas present. He only listened to, he was one of those folks that listened to a little heavy metal here and there, but not very much. And, so he was already sharing all this crazy stuff. He wanted to get a, tape for me for Christmas, but he had no idea, what I would want, what I wouldn't want. So he went out to like Camelot or Walmart and bought a bunch of those compilation tapes out of the, dollar cutout bin. The hot metal 10 tracks, $1.99 cassettes.
A lot of winger.
Yep. He had a lot of bad hair stuff, but some of them did, have heavier stuff. And he very intentionally kind of he put together like just a little 30-minute compilation TDK tape, and it picked songs by bands he hadn't seen albums of laying around my house, but he didn't tell me who any of the bands were. He's like, listen to this and tell me which songs you like the most, but I'm not going to tell you who any of them are. I don't think you know any of them. And I didn't know a damn song on the whole thing. I didn't know what the hell he was doing, so I was just like, okay, sure. And I played it. It was like, okay, there's like 8 songs maybe. I was like, track 3 is the clear winner, and it was a Heathen song. And he went out, bless his heart, and he had got the cassette tape of it for me for Christmas that year. So I was like, holy shit, I've never heard of it. But it was the band I'd kind of picked off this compilation tape he'd made. And then later, like that summer, we were looking at the BMG ad, and we saw that they had the CDs for a penny. And so we both filled out the BMG cards, sent them our penny, got our CDs, and unsubscribed as fast as humanly possible. But that is my backstory on Heathen. We both, his name's Marty also. We both still have our copies of Victims of Deception to this day.
Awesome.
That one desperately needs a reissue.
Can't argue with that. I haven't now. I'll ask y'all. Have either of you heard the newer Heathen albums? I know they've done a couple and they've gotten decent reviews. A lot of
people in the VC have been showing it, but
I have not gotten to hear them yet. But they have. Yeah, there's been some hype around them, so I'm getting the sense they might be pretty good.
I have not heard the new one, Empire of the Blind, but I did hear the one that came out 6 years ago or so. Evolution of Chaos,
That's
and
a good album.
it's
I like
excellent.
that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, chat.
yeah,
If
that one.
anybody in the chat has heard the new Heathen, tell us, is it something we need to go track down right away, or is not worth the time?
Okie dokie. Next up is another band I have sang their praises, much like I've sung the Holy Terror praises. But this album in particular, I've only have 2 albums by this band, but it's another band that's sadly overlooked, unless you're Jurgen, who has had a whole show on them. But Paradox Heresy.
Ooh.
Nice.
This is a reissue. I had the original RC tape back in the day, and I upgraded it to a CD and got rid of the tape like a dummy. But German thrash band. This album in particular, their first album is a little bit more traditional metal tinged, and on this album they embrace the German thrash, and the songs are super well written, I think, because of that heavy metal background they had. And they were never a straight up pure heavy metal band, but I think their first album had a little bit more Metallica going on. But this was just a lot quicker. It just sounds German. It sounds German, and that was always a high mark in my book for sure, because super technical thrash, always a great melody. The singer, great melodious pitch singing style, savageness with good harmonies. Great album.
Yep, good band. And you're right. Yeah, the first album has a little bit more of a Metallica sound to it. The first one, in a way, doesn't sound like a German thrash album.
No,
it has
right.
a little more of an American sound to it, but in a good way.
Yep.
But yeah, I remember that first album. I got it literally the day before I had to leave to go do like 6 weeks of field work in New Mexico and Colorado. And so I was like literally unpacking the record at 4 that afternoon while trying to pack, throwing it on the turntable to run it off onto a TDK tape, because all I could take with me was like a Walkman and just a little handful of cassettes. That was all I was going to listen to for like 6 weeks. And so that ended up, I think, on the flip side of a cassette tape with Viper's Evolution. And so I played those 2 albums a whole lot that summer.
Yeah. All right, Brian.
Awesome. Okay, this is one I'm sure you both are familiar with, or at least the band, Pestilence, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Death Metal Trifecta, RC Records, Seagrave Art, Scott Burns, Morristown Studio production. I'm all in. So, yeah, this is their, I think, 3rd. Obviously, Martin Van Drunen not on this one.
Nope.
Patrick takes over on vocals. Big shoes to fill. Does a pretty good job. I mean, I think the vocals are okay on this one.
A lot cleaner.
Yeah, definitely cleaner. He does his vocals do tend to mimic a bit of John Tardy, a bit of Chuck, quite a bit. That's what I hear. And musically, their earlier stuff is a lot more thrashy. This one is a little bit more technical and progressive. Tony Choi from Cynic on bass guitar, I think. It's still got a lot of those, 90s death metal chugging riffs, but also adds a lot technicality and a lot of the kind of keyboard synth intros, which is kind of good for, adding that atmosphere, kind of gives it that dreamlike sense. I'm not as familiar with the one that came after the Spheres, but Testimony of the Ancients was always a favorite of mine. This is a reissue on Hammerheart that came out recently. So yeah, that's one of my big ones from Pestilence. I've since kind of gone back. This is the first one I heard, and then I went back and listened to this stuff with Van Drunen, and that stuff's amazing too. So I don't know. I can't really go wrong with Pestilence, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's my favorite. This album is absolutely crushing.
Yeah,
I figured you'd
crushing, amazing, well-written death metal that just sounds absolutely well, like the song title on here, "Dehydrated." The opening track on this album, the music sounds dehydrated. Van Drunen sounds sickly and dehydrated.
Yeah,
absolutely great.
One of the best,
crushing, amazing death metal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a reason why so many modern, old school death metal bands are ripping off his style. Because God, he's just so miserable sounding. So I don't know. Great. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, now, the cornerstone of the Roadrunner catalog, Pestilence deserves all that mention. I don't go back and revisit them as much as I should, but yeah, you're right, Marty. They really are one of the bands that are most copied anymore in terms of new bands trying to find their sound.
Hold on.
No problem.
I don't think
Hold
it's
on.
me.
I accidentally triggered Siri, and she started playing music.
She started playing the Pestilence.
She started playing Pestilence.
I did that a few.
Amazing.
I guess it was actually sometime this summer when I was having to record a lecture for class, and I guess I said, the OK combination just right, and the phone went off next to me, and I'm trying to record anything. I was just like rah! In the middle of the video. I was like, okay, sorry, folks.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks. And whoever was talking, I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. Like all of a sudden, Siri's talking to me and music's playing, and anyway. Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Okay, who's next?
Pick Alan.
Alan.
Pick him. Pick him.
Pick
Mr.
me.
Coulson, you're next.
Oh crap! What do you want? Record. Yeah, here we go. Brian, you made a passing reference to this group earlier. Time to break this one out. Death Symbolic. Depending on which day of the week you ask, probably my favorite Death album. But if you ask on a different day, you might get a different answer.
It's a good album.
Yeah, this was. It wasn't the first Death album I heard. It probably wasn't the second. I think it was though the first one that I really dove deep into, where I got it and I was just like, ooh, and was playing it a lot and really picking it apart more than some of the others. Really good album. I like their style. Obviously, different people like different parts of the Death catalog. Every album, for the most part, has its own thing going on. But this one, I just think it has a really good balance between being heavy, having that introspective viewpoint that Chuck did with a lot of the later albums, still being very song oriented. It's not too technical. It's not too aggressive. It really hit a sweet spot with this one. When I first owned it, I had one of those cardboard sleeved promos of it that, again, the WFAL radio station had dumped off. And so I snagged that, and for years, that was the only copy I had. I eventually got a copy in a jewel case. And the promo went to somebody somewhere. I have no idea. But yeah, one of, if not the best albums in the Death catalog. And one that I am thinking, someone had mentioned, we've mentioned a couple times, some things in the Roadrunner catalog need reprinting. Mm-hmm. And this seems to be one of the albums that hasn't gotten the reissue treatment as much as the other stuff in their catalog.
They probably want
and
too much
from what folks were saying in the chat, that Roadrunner parts of their catalog may be in limbo or something, that there are issues getting some of their stuff back out, which is a shame.
Yep. I'm up next, I guess, and this will be my last...
Siri, pick a record for Marty.
Pick a good, nothing embarrassing.
Play some Coal Chamber.
This will be my last thrash contribution to the pile, and it's Ripper, Sadus.
Yeah.
This is a reissue of their self-titled. I had the tape that the band themselves put out. RC got a hold of it, and these are the two best Sadus albums, with this one being absolutely, again, another scathing monument of amazing American thrash. Bay Area. This is a little more cleaner production, a little more proggy, but still savage. Still a great album, amazing songs, absolute top tier American thrash that sounds like no other thrash band in the U.S. No one sounds like Sadus at all, straight up. And it's probably another reason why they were so sadly overlooked.
Yeah, way ahead of their time.
Yeah,
so to speak.
That's when I was a latecomer to. I always heard the name, never heard the music until Marty kept talking about it so much. And yeah, that's just a vicious record.
Oh my God.
Good.
I remember looking through the liner notes for all these other albums I was reading, and they almost all of them thank Sadis, and
Yep.
it's just a band like I never really just ran into when I was at the store, music store. Just
Same here.
In spite of how fast they were, I mean, the musicianship is top notch, and you got Steve DiGiorgio on bass. His bass work just cuts through that speed and aggression. It adds to it too. So I can see why I think they're a musician's band. People really looked up to them for not only their speed and viciousness, but what they were doing.
Absolutely.
Okay, Brian.
Yep.
Okay, well, we're an hour and a half in, and Marty hasn't shown this, so I'm just gonna go fair game.
Yep.
Toxic World Circus.
I'm a latecomer to that album, so I didn't pick it. I have it on tape.
Oh well, I've seen you show it, so I thought maybe this was one you've had for.
It's a good one, but I didn't pull it.
Another one, new to me, probably just in the last couple of years, because another one that's hasn't been repressed. Got repressed last year on vinyl, so I got that copy. Just amazing speed metal, thrash metal, kind of power metal, New York. Amazing Ed Repka cover. This was produced by Tom Morris at Morris Sound, not Scott Burns. So getting a little bit earlier than I think this was 88. Just really high energy, catchy, just great thrash riffs, virtuosity is there, kind of technical at times. It's almost like some of these songs. Heart Attack starts off with that's really straightforward, like thrash, and then Social Overload is almost sounds like an Anthrax song. Voices kind of gets into that proggy territory, lots of interesting riffs and bass fills. Title track World Circus has very kind of straightforward power metal feel to it. Just a lot going on in this. It definitely keeps you entertained, interested. Very happy to get this finally repressed. Comes on this green to go with the artwork. Pretty cool cover. I always liked Ed Repka artwork.
He's still very much.
Oh yeah.
And all of his covers look just like that. You got a prominent character in the front and something going on in the background, and
yep,
he's definitely milking that formula. Sorry, Ed Repka, but it's true.
And I just pre-ordered the follow-up to this. Think This.
That album is a strange departure. What I've heard, it seems a little more. Am I wrong, Alan, in saying a little more glammy?
I don't know the second one, so no, can't say.
I don't know. I just listen. It seems like it's a lot less savage thrash, a little more maybe traditional metal, a little more hair metal-y. I don't know. I could have it mixed up in my head, but I remember being excited to check it out, and I gave it a spin before I bought it and went, woo, thank goodness I didn't buy it. But okay, Alan.
All right. Well, there's at least one more big death metal band from Roadrunner that no one's mentioned yet. So let's do it.
Let's see.
Most people might not pick this album, but it's my favorite from their catalog. Arise, Sepultura.
Oh.
A lot of folks may go for Beneath the Remains. Yep. And that's quite fair. Nothing wrong with that one, but this was my introduction to the band, so that may be why I always kind of gravitated to this one. When this one came out, it made a big splash on Headbangers Ball with the video for Dead Embryonic Cells. And it really struck me because it was around that time that locally myself and the other kids in high school, we were finding more of these bands that were more in the death metal side of things, not just the thrash side of things. And this one struck me as kind of a very good bridge album between the two. That the vocals and such had a death metal heaviness to them, but the song structure still owed a lot to thrash metal at times. That it wasn't pure death metal like we were starting to hear on some other releases that were seeping into our local groups and playlists. The other thing about this album that always just made a big impression on me, the Michael Whalen cover art is just so cool.
It is cool, really different.
It is really different. And this was the kind of thing that, again, always was much, much more interesting to me than anything that Cannibal Corpse was doing.
Yeah.
Everybody else, is, gawking over, zombies eating each other out and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, sure, whatever. But, you look at this thing, it's just like, what is that? Is it alive? Is it architecture? Is it partly alive? How big, trying to get a sense of scale. How large or not large is it? And just how do the pieces fit together? This was another one of those, Waylon's a great artist to begin with, and it's just a really crazy piece put together. I remember sitting in a high school government class, doodling in my notebook, trying to draw something that was along this line. And like the kid across the aisle eventually looked over, and you could just see the horror on his face. not that I was drawing it very good at all, but he was just looking at it, just like, you could just see his brain was thinking, the fuck is wrong with this kid sitting next to me? He's like some kind of goddamn axe murderer or something. I need to move to the other side of the room. But he actually was fairly cool about it. He's just like, oh, okay, I don't know. He actually ended up bringing me a copy of Iron Maiden Somewhere in Time on cassette that I guess he had gotten, and he wasn't a heavy metal kid. It wasn't for him. So he's just like, would you like this? Do you promise not like to kill my family if I give you a treat? It's like, hey, thanks. I'll take that if you don't want it.
Awesome.
But yeah, a really good album. After this, Chaos AD has its songs on it. It's not bad. After that, I had no interest personally in Roots and that kind of stuff. But Arise, it's not a personal death metal favorite or anything, but it's definitely a band that was a huge part of Roadrunner. And this album, was the breakthrough album, that really got them on the map. So figured we had to mention that one.
Good one.
And was that supposed to be the cover to Cause of Death or vice versa? Or was that Beneath Remains? Wasn't that piece of art supposed to be on?
I heard that. I can't remember which way that was, though.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe
trying to
it was
remember
Beneath
that too, that it was originally meant to be for something else and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
For reasons.
That Cause of Death cover is a H.P. Lovecraft book cover, actually.
Yeah, it's
an excerpt from it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have that one on the shelf.
I think I do too. I'm not sure. I've got a few different Lovecraft volumes. But yeah. All right, Marty, we're back to you, I believe.
Okay. Well, from the thrash period, I felt that Roadrunner, Road Racer were very proficient at digging into the budding death metal scene. You got Century Media, you got Nuclear Blast, you got all these other labels that are coming in, staking their claim, pulling their bands out. And this was Brian already showed the second one. This was a very influential. Compilations were the internet of today when it comes to music collecting and learning about new bands. These things were essential, and all my favorite comps I still have, and I still enjoy listening to them. They take me back to that poster covered bedroom. But it led me on to this. This blew my mind first time I heard it. Other than I've said it before, the intro to Beneath the Remains is sounds like "Close My Eyes Forever" by Lita Ford and Ozzy Osbourne, the same guitar melody. I remember sitting in the vehicle listening to it, like, what the fuck is this? I'm singing the Ozzy song over it, and then this kicks in, and I'm just like, what the fuck? So good. But I'm not going to dwell on Sepultura since Alan covered it. The first Deicide. This is my favorite Deicide album. As far as I'm concerned, they never got better than this album. I like Legion a lot, but that's the faster predecessor to this. But the songs on this are just so well written. I like Glenn's vocal dynamics, even though they're a bit absurd at times, much like that band photo. But this is a great Florida death metal. I mean, I'm at this time may have listened to Deicide more than I listened to Cannibal Corpse, because this album is just so well written. Lunatic of God's Creation. Dead by Dawn's not on this one, is it? I don't know. I can't read it right now because it's purple font or purple colored text, and I can't see in this light. But
yeah, Dead by Dawn's on that one.
Is it? Carnage in the Temple of the Damned. So many great albums, great songs on this album. And again, they never topped it. Legion was a close second. And they put out some good stuff over the years, but they've just gotten less and less impact for me as they've gone on. This after this album, but yeah,
Definitely.
death metal years, here we come. I know you guys have already been in it, but I'm just getting there. I'm slow.
Yeah. Deicide is one of those I should probably go back and give another listen to. I never got into them as much as other bands back in the day. Don't really know why. There was always, Glenn Benton was not, the most endearing character. He was either somebody you thought was the coolest person in the world, or you just thought was kind of a big jerk.
Yeah.
And I wasn't interested in his whole gimmick, so it did nothing for me. But I mean, I did listen to the albums, and they just didn't click at the time. But it's been a long time since I heard them. A girl I dated back in college liked them a lot. I remember like the day that Once Upon the Cross came out, we went to the record store so she could buy it the day it came out. She was really looking forward to it, but they just weren't my flavor, at least back in the day. But definitely one of the big bands on Roadrunner. They were another one of that. Right in that period, Roadrunner was knocking it out of the park. They had a monstrous roster of big name death metal bands for sure.
Yeah, they had an amazing stable of U.S. and European death metal.
Yep.
Some great stuff.
It's just amazing with so many bands coming out and such big labels all dipping into that genre that they could grab so many solid, unique bands. Back then, death metal still, a lot of these bands we've shown tonight in the death metal realm, they all have their own sound.
Yeah.
You can't really say that as much about death metal these days. You just can't. I'm not being mean. I still like modern day old school death metal, but chances are out of 10 records, there's going to be 2 that might have a slightly different sound. The rest all kind of sound the same, which is neither good nor bad. It's just the way it is. And if you like it, cool. But if not, back here, when things were new, everybody had their own sound, which was very refreshing.
That's very true. And I, as a person who still kind of dives into the new stuff sounds like the old stuff. And so that's why I like it so much. And a lot of it, like you said, is just kind of a rehashing of like an Incantation or I hear Cannibal Corpse and a lot of the newer bands, especially like Undeath, Skull Maggot. It sounds a lot like earlier Cannibal Corpse. It's just kind of the nature of it. But if they write good riffs, I don't really mind it. I'll still buy it and I still enjoy it. Yeah. But
that's a good point, Brian. You can wear your influences on your sleeve and still do a good job of it and be enjoyable. Yeah, we see that. Yeah. We see that in a lot of genres these days. There's a big nostalgia factor in heavy metal currently. Let's not deny it. You have the whole caveman death metal thing has owed a lot to its ancestors. The whole new wave of traditional heavy metal bands, they're blatantly copycatting the things from the mid '80s and such. But hey, some of those bands do a really good job of it and are enjoyable. So nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, Brian.
All right. Well, since we're on this Deicide kick, I might just bust out my pick was Legion. I mentioned earlier the first 3 I heard was Legion, Breeding the Spawn, and Masters on the Seventh Day Creative Master. This was terrifying. I remember my whatever he is, my half cousin, showed me the inside, showed me you can actually see the burnt cross scar on his head back here.
He's got to regret that decision.
I would say
one of those things like, man, why did I do that?
But that idea as a 14-year-old and looking at this was a death metal that was not pulling any punches. This is we are Satanists. Satan spawned the Cacodemon, he had the Prophet, this was not just horror themed death metal. This was anti-Christ, type stuff. And it was scary for a teenager, but it was one of those things where I was really interested in it. And like you mentioned, Glenn's vocals was totally just terrifying and maniacal. Kind of the way he'd have the main kind of barking type vocal, and then the screeching, just nothing I'd ever heard before. And definitely, like you said, one of the more technical of their discography. Great solos, classic lineup here. And I think I dropped off after Once Upon the Cross. And I've kind of checked back in here and there. I like Stench Redemption, and I like the newer one, Overtures of Blasphemy, but the rest of it didn't really much interest me. So
I think if it is a lot of that newer stuff, it might be good, but if they're sitting on a shelf next to Legion, you're not going to grab the new stuff typically. You're going to want to listen to Legion again.
Yeah, very true. Dead but Dreaming, another great song.
I really like the intro on that too. It's a really creepy with the sheep and stuff.
Yes, that was
a very creepy intro, and yeah,
it's a classic. They put out a lot of Roadrunner in general put out a lot of classic material.
Yep,
classic death metal.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, Alan.
All right, I got a couple of funner ones. This was a band that somehow, again, this is one of those things that makes no sense, where I heard this band, and owned albums by this band before I owned things by Slayer, and it's Annihilator, which was sort of an obscure-ish one at the time. They were a Roadrunner, Road Racer release, but yeah, I can't really explain how this one got into the local circles with my friends before things like Slayer were getting much attention. Some kid at band camp had, and that's literally what it was. He had, I think he had the other one, Alice in Hell.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you're out there, marching in 90-degree heat and 80% humidity for a couple hours, and they give you a 30-minute break to go, drink water, and we're hanging out in the parking lot. And he's blasting Alice in Hell. I'm just like, damn, that's pretty good. Who is that? He's like, Annihilator. I'm just like, I've never heard of him. He's just like, again, he had made the pilgrimage, 90 minutes to the big city, and had seen it and thought it looked cool in the record store, so he picked it up. Just like, yeah, I'm gonna have to pick that up myself. And I found this one first. They didn't have Alice in Hell, so I ended up getting Never Neverland first, and later getting Alice in Hell. Good thrash albums. For sure, Alice in Hell is kind of a minor classic. The track in particular, the Jeff Waters guitar work is really nice. It's very solid. There's the songs on here are varied. They sound good. There's the kind of some of the goofier ones are the ones that stand out though. There's the song Craft Dinner on here about eating macaroni and cheese, which again, it's that goofier side of thrash that was a thing by then. But
does that have the Fun Palace on it?
This one does, yes. The Fun Palace is the opening track, which is not the best opening track for an album. They could have chose a better opener. Road to Ruin, though, gets better. The Stonewall isn't bad. Never Neverland is a kind of a creepy one. Both it's kind of Alice in Hell Part 2, another story about based on a true life thing where a little kid was kind of locked up and by some deranged grandma because she actually kissed a boy or something insane like that. Phantasmagoria is a really good one here. But Annihilator, they never conquered the thrash world, but they just stuck around. They've had a good run of it over time. There was that third album that was different. We'll just stick to the first two. Which for tonight.
Was that one?
Yeah, Set the World on Fire.
Okay.
I don't know if I've heard that one.
I don't know I have either. I thought I had.
Yeah, there's a reason you haven't heard it. The lead single for it was a ballad, and we're talking like Mr. Big kind of ballad.
Oh boy.
It was like Sounds Good to Me check out Annihilator, Sound Good to Me, play the first 30 seconds of it, and then go do something important with your life. It's a weird one. There were one or two songs I liked on the album, but yeah, it was it came out at the worst time too. It came out right there in the wake of the Black Album and everything, when those thrash bands were quickly withering away, and Set the World on Fire probably accelerated the process for a lot of bands. But Never Neverland's a decent follow-up to Alice in Hell, even though it doesn't get as much attention. So yeah, it's not going to be on my top 25 albums anytime soon, but it deserves a mention for sure. I think it's a band that a lot of people do have good memories of, with some of their fun tracks and some of their cooler tracks.
Yeah, Alice in Hell was the one for me, but I do like that album too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I guess.
They have different vocalists on the album. So yeah, I think most people just like Alice better.
Does Jeff Waters sing on the first two?
No.
No,
Randy Rampage sings on Alice in Hell, and another guy sings on that one.
Yep, the Randy Rampage, great name for a metal vocalist.
Yeah,
he gets extra points for that.
All right. Well, since we've covered a lot of death metal stuff, I have just a couple more to show in that class. But I guess we'll start off with, for its time, what maybe some would have considered the Nickelback of death metal. Meaning,
well, we didn't like that.
meaning that this album was greatly bashed by a lot of death metal purists and overlooked until many years later, and that's Cynic's Focus. This is a band that...
The Nickelback of death metal.
I'm just saying that they were hated.
This is not the album I was expecting you to show after that build-up.
No, I didn't either.
Who are you expecting to show?
I was expecting some kind of like 6 Feet Under knockoff or something.
Oh, no. Basically, Roadrunner did not know, and this was actually a Roadrunner release.
Mm-hmm.
Roadrunner didn't really know what to do with these guys. I mean, they're super proggy, even on this. There's a lot of fragile moments on this album, mixed in with some cool. I mean, the demos leading up to this album sound a little bit different than the way this album went. So I think the band was probably signed on the strength of the demos, and then this album was presented and it was pretty groundbreaking. So they were put on a tour with Cannibal Corpse and Sinister. I had a friend that went to the show and he said that people were booing Cynic and throwing shit at them. And, again, most super innovative, unique bands typically don't get their due until much later. The band broke up after this album for obvious reasons. They just weren't. I mean, a couple of these guys were on In Death. I mean,
yep.
Reiner,
Human.
Yeah.
Human. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mastival and Sean Reiner.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the core of this band should have appealed to a much wider death metal audience, but they just took a more artistic prog approach to writing death metal songs. And death metal purists just did not get it. Mm-hmm. And it is now. I mean, I got this album and thought, what the fuck is this garbage? But, later on, I decided I was going to buy it back because I had the tape of it. And, this CD, it goes for hundreds of dollars. So you can just see the progression of people's interest is how, these bands ahead of their time. It takes sometimes people, they need to stop so people can catch up with them. Cynic was the Nickelback thing was probably not accurate, but I was just trying to be funny. But I
want to be up all night figuring that one out.
Other than the fact that they were hated by the
Your description is dead on. That band was years ahead of its time.
Oh, yeah.
In the death metal landscape around 93, nobody knew what to do with that album. That one sat in the used bin in Northwest Ohio for years. And that's not hyperbole. I mean, it sat there semester after semester and nobody bought it. I probably picked it up a dozen times looking at it because I saw it was a Roadrunner release. I'm like, this it could be interesting. It could be weird. I don't know. The radio station, it was probably the radio station copy. So I'd call them up. Like, hey, can you play some Cynic? No. Okay. I'll call back in 5 minutes later and bug you with something else. So I had no idea what it sounded like. And it just never quite floated, to this top of the stack. Someone eventually, I got it and heard it in a tape trade. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty interesting. But it's, I mean, it's one you really got to sit and focus on, pun intended, to get it. And at the time, today, again, it seems like, yes, masterpiece of the genre, all that. Nobody knew what to do with that album in the early and mid-90s. Not a clue.
Here's a good question.
Yeah,
was Atheist ever viewed similarly? And I would say no. I think their first album, Piece of Time, was, I think, kind of celebrated. I think they did not do the weird proggy stuff until a little bit later, after they established a core audience,
Yeah, exactly. The Piece of Time has some quirks about it, for sure, but it's enough of a straightforward death metal album that, they got their flag planted, and then they did the crazy shit.
Yep.
So people were checking it out. Cynic didn't do that.
No.
Cynic didn't have the merciless virgin slaughter demo.
Well, they did that on their demos. The demos were more straightforward death metal.
Are they? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and check those out.
It's a bit different on the CD.
But yeah, and folks have to remember too. I mean, this progressive metal period was not widely celebrated in the early 90s. It's not like there were other contemporary bands that did get really high acclaim around then. You had just had Dream Theater was a newish thing. Yeah, Images and Words had just sort of broken out a couple years before that. Folks were still coming to grips with the progressive side of heavy metal. Death was what album was Death on by 93? Human?
I would think so, or Spiritual.
Spiritual Healing was about 1990.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
it was Human.
Yeah, as Human, maybe you were getting closer to Symbolic coming out. You didn't have a huge catalog of these kind of very high-minded death metal albums that people were used to. It was very very weird, very out of place.
93 was Individual Thought Patterns.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Individual. Yeah, I forgot that one in there. So bands were starting to do that stuff, but it was those were the exception. They were not the rule yet.
Richard brings up he hated the vocoder, and that was a primary vocal treatment on the Cynic album, which was often used in industrial dance pop style.
I remember
music.
hearing that.
So they were definitely experimenting with different tech that was afforded to them in the studio, I'm sure, but it was not looked at favorably.
Yeah, you're used to singing like this.
Yeah.
Now you are singing like this. It messed with people. I remember that vocoder thing. I didn't hate it, but I was just like,
it was definitely
weird. Yeah, it's very weird.
It's like when you try out a new toothpaste for the first time, you get that
that texture in your mouth.
Yeah, you get that weird texture and a funny taste you weren't expecting.
Crystals.
Okay, charcoal toothpaste.
Weird.
Cynic with increased whitening focusing power.
Brian, you're up.
Okay,
less tooth rot than Cannibal Corpse.
This one might get me booted.
There we go.
Marty, get ready to hit the button.
Machine Head.
Oh,
burn my eyes.
That's a tough one to swallow, but it's all good.
94. I was sophomore in high school. Had that teen angst going on, and watched a lot of MTV, Headbangers Ball, and they played the crap out of the music video for this one. And at the time, I was big into stuff like Rage Against the Machine and Tool and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Kind of getting into the rap metal type scene, and this fit right in.
You say the B word and I hit the button.
Yep.
This
isn't, obviously they'd go on to kind of start that new metal scene. And Rob Flynn is definitely a character, but this one, Pantera was huge too. And this definitely takes a lot from Pantera, the groove and the chugging. And I don't know, because it was kind of important to me during that time period, I still feel like it holds up. The rest of their catalog, not so much. Actually, a couple years ago, I got to see them play this album in its entirety. I don't think I would have gone to one of their shows unless they were doing that. I don't really want to see any of the other stuff. So they played this in its entirety, and it was a nice, nostalgic trip back to that period of time. And I don't know, I still think it's good album. I don't listen to it often. In fact, this is the first time I busted it out in quite a long time, probably since I saw them back in 2015. Machine Head burned my eyes, and we'll move on.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
It was a big release for the label.
It was.
Oh yeah.
I remember when it came out, and Yeah, I picked up a copy. I'm pretty sure I got a used copy, but pretty soon after it came out. And I'd heard, a couple of songs from it, and I tried really hard to like that album. I mean, I gave it a lot of spins. I expected to like it, based on the track or two I heard. I thought, yeah, this would probably be pretty good. And after, a couple of weeks of, spinning it, over and over, I just finally realized it's like, I'm just not into this very much. And I remember it being one of those releases where I started to realize that my, musical taste, I was digging into things that were, different directions, just different styles, that particular sound, and that's one of those albums I very much equate with the 90s US heavy metal direction for what was popular with the Panteras and such.
Yeah.
That Burn My Eyes was one of the albums that really kind of, helped, cement the fact that, this just isn't my style of heavy metal. Some of the albums are okay, some not, but I'm just not into this stuff. I'm still digging up, cool thrash metal. I'm digging into new wave of British heavy metal by then. I'm digging into German metal. I'm just like, I'm listening to death metal. I was starting to find some black metal releases around that time. I'm like, all these other things click really well. And the sound for it is the sound that's doing well in the US with, bands like those. That was the album that really made me conclude, I don't think this is for me. This is not the stuff I need to be spending a lot of time listening to, because there's a lot of other cool stuff, and I'm just going to enjoy it more. So that was one of the last albums like that, where it was a bigger release from one of those bands that had that more aggro sound to it, that I really did try to buy into, and it just didn't work for me. Other folks like the style, and that's, in all seriousness, that's absolutely fine. If you dig it, that's cool.
And I get it. It had its place for sure. But Human Falafel kind of sized up how I went into it. I was a Violence fan, and going into it, Rob Flynn's new band, and then hearing a Pantera wannabe, it was not, because I'm a guy that lived through the 90s, and I just was not. I have Cowboys from Hell and Vulgar Display of Power, which I got one of those BMG Columbia House.
Me too.
Because everybody's talking about them, and they just never clicked with me.
Yeah.
I never like bands like Ex Hoarder. There's something about that Southern sound. I just never could click with me on that stuff. And, and Pantera obviously influenced thousands and thousands of bands. And the 90s were a prime example of that runoff, And Machine Head always struck me as that, mixed with a bit of rap. And it just, two sounds that just did not sit well with me, especially from a guy coming from Violence, Eternal Nightmare and Oppressing the Masses were very well replayed throughout my teen years, my high school years.
Yep. Yeah, I had kind of the same experience with Pantera. I mean, I'm pretty sure Vulgar Display came out. It either came out my junior or senior year of high school. And I mean, it literally almost instantly became the soundtrack to Headbangers Ball.
Yeah.
So
it was. I mean, they
literally.
Yeah.
It was their intro music.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I bought Vulgar. I think I bought Vulgar Display maybe the day it came out. I happened to, be in the big city that day and, grabbed it. And, and it was another album. I played it to death. But at the end of the day, when it, I stopped flipping the cassette tape from side A to side B, I eventually realized this. I liked the song, "The Mouth of War." I liked the lead single off of it. Mm-hmm. I had a hard time finding another song that I really connected with. Everyone praises him to death, and I'm not, here to rag on the dead or anything. I never really got into Dimebag Darrell's guitar style. His overall guitar tone just never worked for me. That his particular style of very staccato, picking and stuff. I get that he's a great technical guitar player, but it just wasn't a sound that worked for me at all. But I still went on and played lots of other albums by those bands. I got other Pantera albums and tried them too. But yeah, it was really that Machine Head album. By that point, I was just like, okay, I just need to put this style to rest, and other folks can enjoy that, and I'll go find that other Chateau album from Neat Records or Ebony or that was released 13 years ago, and I'll go dig that. Where's another Running Wild CD? Damn it!
Well, that just shows my age because my introduction to like really metal in general was the Black Album. It was Countdown to Extinction from Megadeth. It was Seasons in the Abyss, Headbangers Ball, and so Pantera's Vulgar Display of Power came out right at the, or at least I heard it right at the moment that I was, all into metal. I knew that's what I liked, and so it was easy. Those albums are easy to get into because they're so catchy.
Yeah.
And it was, I guess that's my baseline,
Yeah.
That's where I started. And then I started working my way toward the death metal and the other stuff. And then, as I got older, went back in time and tried to check out the stuff I missed. But yeah, so that's kind of where I am at on those albums. But I definitely understand like why people, especially this one, Burn My Eyes. I mean, it's definitely has its moments of cringiness,
Well, it's a time stamp on your youth. I mean, all this shit I'm showing is a time stamp on a very formative era for me. And anything like Burn My Eyes or whatever else that has an impact on you that makes you want to keep pursuing that musical journey, that's good stuff. Everybody's musical journey is different, and to poo-poo someone's style or taste it's pretty superficial and lame. We'll tease and rib. I mean, I've got Neil Diamond records. I've got Opera records. I'm a child of the 70s. Of course I'm going to have some of that shit, but it is whatever gets you through the day, makes you happy.
Leave my Danger albums out of this.
That's right. You're sleaze bees. You just weren't feeling particularly fucking hostile the day you were trying to get into Pantera.
I was ain't no business like monkey business.
Right. Whose turn? Oh, it's Alan's turn.
Yeah,
right.
We got a little sidetracked there. Sorry, that's probably my fault.
Too bad Danger didn't put out an album on Roadrunner.
If they had, it would have been on this list.
Yeah.
I will pick another odd one though. That's on Roadrunner that most people will probably be like, "That's on Roadrunner? Why?" But it's a fun one, and I've played it to death over the years. It's not their best material, but I think it's a very fun album. Misfits' Famous Monsters is a Roadrunner release.
And Jason Hook
came out right around it came out at very tail end of 1999. It's the second one in the Michael Graves era after American Psycho did quite well. The album, by all accounts, almost just completely crashed and burned when they were trying to put it together. There's something about Misfits that they were always a little bit cursed trying to get material out. They had so many good connections and so many promising leads, and every one of them just almost turned into a false start over and over again. And I don't remember all the details, but in terms of trying to get this album recorded and put together, it literally apparently was just this far away from just being completely shelved and everybody just walking away from the project completely. So, but they pulled it off, got it out there, and I know a lot of purists don't really care for the Graves era. I get that. The Danzig era, yes, that material is much better. It's much different. But I really do like these two Graves albums. They're very fun. They're very catchy. They're great music to listen to when you just want to get the adrenaline going, wake up, really get yourself pumped up. And this one has just some fantastic songs on it. It has some duds, too. I'm not claiming this album is perfect by any means. But it starts with, really just, bang, bang, bang series of tracks with Forbidden Zone, Lost in Space, Dust to Dust has, this really heavy vibe to it that's great. There are a lot of good ones. It has, the kind of fun 50s throwback one, Saturday Night, which, has a little different vibe to it. Them is another fantastic one. The closing track, Helena, has a very weird vibe that always reminded me a little bit of like an old Police song with just this weird, almost, kind of weird staggered pacing, but it's great. So there's a lot of very fun material on the album, and I've played this album. I do program this one. This one, I like, there's about 5 songs I skip that I just do not want to hear. But all the other ones, it's a very fun release. So if you can get past the fact that, it's not Glenn Danzig, and it's not meant to be that style of Misfits album, but it is a really fun, horror punk listen with a lot of excellent tracks throughout it.
I have nothing to add to that.
It's quite okay.
I'm not a Misfits guy.
I don't have a single Misfits album.
I don't.
The shelf back there, it's not as bad as the Pentagram shelf, but it's getting there. But yeah, it's a fun album for what it is. All right, Mr. Marty.
This will be my last death metal album, and it was mentioned earlier on in the stream. I picked them because they're always kind of a weird band for me. I really enjoy their second album, but Germany's Atrocity, Hallucinations, and Longing for Death. This is on the proper Roadrunner. This is a reissue on Napalm, but the early stuff was RC, I think. The second one here is a Roadrunner. But yeah, this is another one of those bands. The first three albums, the first four albums, all sound completely different from each other. They start off very techie death. This album, I really wanted to love it when it came out because it was right in my wheelhouse. But the songs, they were more tech than they're too tech for their own good. This album for me is kind of hard to listen to. The songs are kind of a mess. There's some good songs on this album, but the over technical, they did not walk that line very well between memorable songs and technical riffing. They got it way more figured out on the Longing for Death. This was named something else in Europe. I can't remember what it was named in Europe, but they went a little bit more traditional death metal on this album. There's a Archangel was a death song. They did a cover as a bonus track, a death demo song. This came out in 92 during the height of the death metal explosion. Really well written, heavy as hell. Alex Kroll's vocals are great. Super memorable songwriting. The dude does dip into the tech side a little bit, but not as off the wall crazy as this one was. But great album. After this, the BLUT or Blut album is a mess, a stylistic shift. It makes little or no sense, and from there on, the band just got really strange and kind of unlistenable.
Did you say they're from Germany?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They were one of the bands on that At Death's Door 2 compilation that I never delved into.
Yeah, those are ones that I don't think those. I think that's another one that needs a reissue. Last time I checked, I don't remember seeing any recent pressings because those are ones that have, they're harder to find and have climbed up in price too. But yeah, the first two really interesting albums, pretty cool stuff.
I'll track those down.
Exactly, Human Falafel. It's not the first one is really not an easy listen.
Oh, okay.
Okay, next up is Mr. Arkham.
Okay. Crimson Glory.
Great album.
Nice.
That's
Transcendence.
I mean, that's really. I was going to pick that.
That's really all you need to say. Amazing. This is their second. Amazing artwork too.
It's great artwork.
Yeah. Just, I don't know. I think the vocals on this are really top notch. It's really Midnight is really the star of the show here. I mean, I guess a generic comparison is like Jeff Tate, in style and sound. U.S. power metal with some progressive influence or elements. Lady of Winter is an amazing lead-off track. Just great. And I don't know. He's got a great voice, but he also sings with a lot of emotion. I feel like. Check the third track, Painted Skies. Wow, that song just really, really gets you. You can tell he. I don't know. He feels all the feelings, a lot of different themes going on here, like heartbreak, stuff like that. Back when this came out in '88, back when I would have discovered it in the mid '90s, I would have totally just dismissed this. Would have no interest in it whatsoever.
Me too. I was too death metal guy. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It was all death metal or the heavier stuff. But in the last couple of years, I've started to get into trying to, go back in time, backtrack. So I definitely have new appreciation, or a better appreciation of it now that I'm not so narrow-minded, you know. So yeah, this is just a great album. It was great. It was fun getting this out the last week or so, and re-listening to it again. It just sounds great.
Yeah.
I don't know how many more they did with him with Midnight before he died.
One more.
3 total.
So okay.
They did a
that's the
self-titled and then Transcendence, and they did a third album called Strange and Beautiful that came out in the early 90s, and it was on a bigger label. It may have been on Atlantic, and it's a disaster.
I heard it was bad. I never
Really?
It's cold. It's a Cold Lake kind of disaster all over again. There's 1 or 2 nice songs on it, but I mean they're pretty radio ballad type tracks. There's nothing. It loses everything that makes those first 2 albums really magical. Sad to say, but
I'll avoid
that's
that.
a really good pick, Brian. Crimson Glory is a band that's never. They've got their fan base. They've never really gotten their due, though, in terms of how strong the material was. I feel like they and a lot of bands similar to them have always lived in the shadow of Queensryche, because they're doing that traditional style of metal, but with a higher degree of musicality than a lot of your average U.S. power metal bands had back then. Yeah. They obviously recruited vocalists that were meant to be in the Jeff Tate mold of being able to sing. Tried to come up with more intelligent songs rather than just writing about, hey, there's nothing wrong with writing about beer and swords and dragons and mistress spanks a lot, chaining you to the bed, but everybody does it.
Yeah.
So those bands, they were obviously trying to do something a little more mature or cerebral or highbrow, however you want to phrase it. And every damn one of them got kind of overlooked because I think Queensryche was just so monstrous that it was hard to get noticed as long as Jeff Tate and company were on the scene. But there's so many bands like that. And some of them were better than others, but Crimson Glory was as good as any of them. There's the Heir Apparents and the Apollo Raws and Scarlet Rain. I can name a dozen of them if I sit here and think about it. Hey, I should do an episode of Let's Talk Metal about that sometime.
Heir Apparent.
But
Scarlet Rain?
Scarlet Rain is one that just did some demo material back in the day. That falls into that same kind of style of Queensryche influenced metal. But yeah, Crimson Glory is the cream of the crop. Personally, I like the self-titled album a little bit better, but Transcendence I think is definitely the fan favorite overall.
Yeah, the first one's great, but this Transcendence is my favorite for sure.
Yeah. The self-titled, the track for me, Dragon Lady, whichever album has Dragon Lady is just not going to be beat. That's my track.
Yeah.
Love that.
It's no Mistress Spanks a Lot though.
No. Mr. Spanks a Lot. That's on an album by some bands misspelled their name, and all their other songs have the words rock or metal in the song titles. Yeah. Crimson Glory, they paid for the good mistress.
Right. All right, Alan, you're up.
All right. So fun fact on the Crimson Glory one to transition here. It's one that Roadrunner technically had to license at first, because they were on it, actually technically signed to a tiny American label called Par Records, which was a record store / studio / label in the Tampa area. It's the label that Savatage started out on. And Crimson Glory being another, Florida, product, they ended up on the same label. So I'm pulled a couple of things that are Roadrunner releases, but also kind of had a tie to an American label. And this one came out on Roadrunner at the same time that in the US it got released on Relativity Records. And it's Corrosion of Conformity's Blind. This is kind of the transition album for them. Earlier stuff, of course, had a lot more to do with, hardcore scene and such. After this album, they get into that sort of Sabbath, Southern, sludgy, stoner sound, which they were very good at. I've talked about some of those albums before, and they did a good job with that style. This is the weird in-between album where at times it's got some thrashy elements. At times it still definitely has more of that punk attitude with tracks like Vote with a Bullet.
Yeah.
It doesn't really. It's very much stands kind of on its own in their catalog, at least among the albums I've heard. I've not heard their whole catalog, but this was another one that, while the band had a following with their earlier stuff, this one got them on the map because this is the one that got the Headbangers Ball airplay with Dance of the Dead. It was the track that got a lot of spins with Ricky Rackman and company back then. It was a cool track. It has a good vibe to it, and it's a fun album. It's one that I owned on tape back in the day, and when I got rid of my cassettes, it was one of the things I definitely went back, and found. When I found it in the dollar CD cutout bin, it's just like, yeah, I do want a physical copy of that one. I just don't want it on cassette anymore. So yeah, it's one that it was kind of a co-release, which, as we've talked about, Roadrunner did a ton of that stuff, licensing with other labels. And they went through a period with Relativity where they were doing those simultaneous releases. Relativity would do the US, Roadrunner would do the European, and they'd come out on the exact same day. So it's kind of hard to say they were licensing it, but it wasn't a reissue or anything. But Roadrunner, yeah, they had ties with just so many weird labels. They had early ties to Important and Green World distribution in the US for stuff, and later on it was like Relativity. So I did want to have a couple of things that they were sort of connected to some of their other labels as well. And that one, just a cool album that doesn't get mentioned as much as it should.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Next up, let's get weird. This is an early band that started to Road Racer, also coming out of the death metal sphere. They started to dip their toe into the budding industrial metal scene that was starting to come out. I don't know which one of these came first. I think this one came first. France's Trempenum Pal.
Whoa.
This is a very bizarre. They're very bizarre. It's if you don't have an open mind for it, you might not like it. It is heart metal. There's some industrial feelings to it, but this band has a very strange vocal style. It's kind of a weird spoken. The accent's strange because they're French. It's in English. The Black Box is great. Silico. Soft Mouth Vagina, very strange lyrical themes. Too Many Humans, very nihilistic sounding album that starts to dabble into the industrial sphere. I've got two more albums that came out after this. This was my favorite. First one I heard, I got it on tape back in the day, but very strange French metal / I want to say industrial because that's the feeling. But there isn't a lot of electronics added to this. It's just more in spirit. There's like a very plotting nature to this album. It's hard to describe. I don't know. They're French. It's off the wall French oddball metal. Anybody else have this album?
I've never even heard of that one.
Oh, really?
Good deep dive there.
Right on.
Yep.
That's awesome. What was the name of the band again?
Trempenum Pal.
Trempenum Pal.
Nope, don't know that one.
Soft Mouth Vagina. Check it out.
Let me just Google that here. Oh wait, I better put on the clear history. Clear history.
All right, Brian, you're up.
All right.
So where are we at in our stack, fellas? Just so we know.
I've got two more bands.
Okay, I've got a couple more I want to shout out. You doing good with your stack, Brian?
Yep, I have 4 that I pulled, but I don't have to show all 4. Maybe whatever.
You can show them. It's all good.
Okay. So next one is Alice in Chains is my favorite band of all time. Have been since I first heard Man in the Box. So in 2002, Jerry Cantrell put out Degradation Trip on Roadrunner. This is his second solo album. He was Alice in Chains and him were both signed to Columbia, so this was his first album recorded that wasn't on Columbia. So when it came out, I thought it was a strange pairing to be on Roadrunner Records. So apparently he, holed himself up in his house for a few months and wrote like 25 songs. Roadrunner wouldn't put out a double album, so he cut it down to like 14 songs and put this out. Later it would get the double album treatment. But this is kind of Jerry's, I don't know, his kind of farewell to his band, to Lane Staley. I think he dedicates it to Lane Staley. There's a lot of anger on this toward Lane about, with his drug addiction and his death. He saw, the end of his friend, the death of his friend and the death of his band, essentially. So it's very dark. Obviously, you can see the kind of the artworks, like, pulling strings kind of toward the idea of like, heroin use. Anyway, very much a solo album in all regards. He previously used Alice in Chains drummer Sean Kinney on his first solo record. This one he gets Mike Borden from Faith No More and Robert Trio from Suicidal and Metallica plays bass. Just really dark stuff. I mean, very much in the Alice in Chains Jerry Cantrell sound. I mean, he's got a sound, and it sounds like him, and he does all the vocals. I always thought he was a really great vocalist. I actually saw him on this tour. I still got my ticket there. This was 2002, October 30th, that he played here in Peoria, and I went with a friend of mine, and he knew someone that worked security at this club. And so we went around back to, see if we can get in the back. But our friend wasn't there. So as I'm walking back, there's this guy that comes out dressed in like a zombie outfit. It's October 30th. So it's the day before Halloween. And he yells something and walks through the alley. And it was like, okay, that was kind of crazy. So then we go in, the show starts. And Jerry comes out and he's dressed like Dead Elvis. So he was the dude out and back that came out and like yelled something at us. Yeah. Like, oh my God. And we both looked at each other like, he was right there. We could have, whatever. That was funny.
Awesome.
Cool story.
There it is.
All right, Alan.
All right. Got getting to the bottom of the stack, but another one of the traditional metal releases on Roadrunner that I like to shout out. It's an old favorite. Is Witchcross Fit for Fight on Roadrunner. This is another one of those. I've mentioned this in other topics because this is one of those bands that was kind of a one and done deal. They made a single. They made this excellent album, and they kind of disappeared. Not to resurface, until much later. But yeah, it's really strong, European flavored, mid 80s metal. Like a ton of the songs on it. This one, I didn't have it, higher on my list tonight because it is another one that technically was licensed, even though, 99 out of 100 copies you see are Roadrunner. Roadrunner had to license it from a small Swedish label called Vision Records, which is this label, which, as far as I know, they never released another album in the history of music. I've never seen anything by them. But yeah, when you look at the cover, the color scheme's a little different on the older pressing. And so even though everybody thinks of them as a Roadrunner band, it wasn't actually a Roadrunner signing. They just picked up on it and got it much better distribution. I'm sure these copies never really got, very far from home when the band put the album out. But then Roadrunner got it distributed a bit farther and wider. And over the years, it's become a bit of a cult classic in heavy metal circles. So, yeah, always liked the Witchcross album quite a bit, and since most people know it as a Roadrunner release, I decided it was fair game to give it a shout out.
I recently not recently, a number of years ago, got their, I guess they did got back together and put out an album, maybe in the late 2010s.
I'll check. I remember.
Anyway,
yeah.
I thought it was excellent, but I have not tracked down a copy of that Fit for Fight because it's kind of hard to find.
It's another one that said, to me, it's like it's a $10 record you see in cutout bins, but then when I stop and think about it, I haven't seen it in a cutout bin in 20 years, and yeah, if I looked on Discogs at the prices right now, I'd probably be very, very confused. But yeah, let's see, when was that Witchcross kind of reunion gig? Because I know they've had collections of the older demos and stuff put back together.
It was Axe to Grind, 2013.
Okay, yeah, I never did hear that one. And actually, they've got an album out this year, it looks like, called Angel of Death. Has that come out yet? It just came out back in June. I haven't seen it anywhere yet. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. I don't know if any of the original guys are even involved or not, but it'll be worth checking into.
Yeah.
All right, Marty, what you got here?
All right, we're staying weird. Another one, just digging into the more industrialized metal aspect. People in the chat were talking about this band earlier, Skin Chamber's Wound. This is the first of two albums put out by Paul Lemos and Chris Moriarty from the band Controlled Bleeding, who are also awesome. Chris Moriarty passed away in 2008. Skin Chamber took what Controlled Bleeding were always, they kind of shifted in styles from album to album, but they had a very metallic industrial era. Tales from the Grinding Wall and Trudge, really good albums, dark, twisted, weird, industrial with some heavier elements. Skin Chamber sounds a lot like Controlled Bleeding, but with more guitars, more metal. And you have a tetanus shot to take part in the band photo. No tetanus shot, no band photo. But yes, this was a great album, a very weird, dark, twisted album. I don't know how well it sat with people. This came out in 91 during the height of the death metal explosion. So you have a couple industrialites coming in and planting their flag and a metal sound. I don't know how well it was received. I thought it was strange. I couldn't listen to it a lot, but when I did put it on, I really did enjoy it. I always heard Controlled Bleeding first, so this was a very interesting transition. Again, I mean, Paul Lemos he had several other projects as well. He was very diverse musician, but interesting. If you're into the industrial metal combination, this would be a very interesting place to start. Very creative, sounding kind of different than a lot of other bands like Screw and Mal Havoc, stuff like that.
Cool.
That was a good show, Marty, because Roadrunner did have some of those bands with that industrial metal style, and we haven't really touched on that much tonight. So that was a good inclusion to highlight that side of the label.
I wanted to make sure I had a good cross section of styles that I was into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that Skin Chamber had a song on this compilation.
Oh, did?
Yeah,
which
Sucked
one?
Inside was the name of it. And this came out in 93, so maybe it was on their second.
It was off their second album, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
I remember listening to that. It's the last track on here, and yeah, it was just
different.
It was a little too weird for me at the time.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, the industrial stuff was another style that was got popular around that time frame that I tried and just never could quite get over the hump with. I had Ministry albums and Fear Factory and stuff, and not terrible, but it just at the end of the day is like just not quite for me. But Brian's got something that's good for him. What you got next, Brian?
I got 1991 album Kinetic Descent.
Oops, sorry. I was looking at something else.
You guys familiar with this one?
No, don't know this one.
Came out on Road Racer '91. This cover art is something to be seen. Actually, it's interesting because I only got this year earlier. I just kind of found it randomly, and it was on Road Racer again, so I grabbed it. But it's got this picture here. It looks a lot like Paradise Lost 1 second cover.
Yeah.
It might be the same photo or whatever. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, but getting back to the artwork, we got a dude in like a American flag loincloth going up against like a phoenix. Very cool. I wish I had it bigger, but this is really good, like technical thrash, kind of progressive. They're from Atlanta. They put out a few demos from like 87 to 91. This is their first album. Actually, it's their only album. They're definitely a little bit experimental in that it seems like they use a little bit of, to me, it sounds a little bit like grunge here and there in their sound. So it's like technical thrash with some progressive elements, but also a little bit of kind of the catchiness of grunge. It's very upbeat, which is kind of interesting. It's not like a dark album. It's kind of upbeat, uplifting. I don't know. Lots of hooks, a lot of melody. Kind of very catchy. The vocalist doesn't really have a standard thrash or power metal voice. He kind of stays in that mid-range. They get a little funky at times with like the bass guitar, which kind of adds the progginess, I guess. But yeah, this is just a kind of a fun pick that I kind of found randomly. The demos were recently reissued on through Dive Bomb Records, if you're familiar with that distro label. They have the 3 demos together on a CD. This is very good. I don't know why I never heard of it. I never heard anyone talk about it. It's kind of a random find. It was really good.
Never even heard of them.
Yeah,
neat. Yeah, that's a completely new one to me.
Maybe someone in the chat has. Not yet.
All right, Alan.
All right, so I don't have any other physical ones to show off, but someone in the chat earlier mentioned a really cool one that at least deserved a quick shout out with Mad Max, which was a cool Euro metal band. I used to have their second album, which was Rolling Thunder. Had some really cool. The opening track on that one is just perfect, majestic European, mid '80s power metal called "Fly, Fly Away." Another one I used to have that is a pretty cool album. Shouldn't have got rid of this one. My bad. Yeah, we all make mistakes. But this one has a funny history to it. It's a band called Dark Heart, and the album's called Shadows of the Night. And that is not the most metal of album covers you're ever going to see. It's kind of a later entry in new wave of British heavy metal style sounding. This will be a rather obscure comparison, but for folks that are familiar with Incubus, To the Devil a Daughter, the LP on Guardian, this album sounds a bit like that one. Very guitar driven, still showing some 70s hard rock band influences, but in a good way, on a lot of the songs and the guitar structures in particular. Anyway, there's a funny little historical note about this one. I always liked it. It's a good catchy album, but it was a Roadrunner issue, and it was one of the things that Brian Slagel picked to license onto Metal Blade. So again, these labels would kind of do deals back and forth. Roadrunner was obviously putting out a lot of early Metal Blade stuff in Europe, and so Brian put out some early Roadrunner stuff on Metal Blade, and Dark Heart was one of the titles he picked, and it holds the record, according to Slagel, for the worst selling Metal Blade release of all time. And he's quoted the number, I don't remember, but I think it literally only sold something like a couple of hundred copies in the entire country. Yeah, just nobody bought the damn thing. And he said, he's like, he's like, hey, I thought it was a cool album. I liked it. It bombed, but yeah, whatever. I thought it was cool. I always thought it was kind of a cool one too. It has been reissued on some other label at least once. You can find like a cheap digipack CD issue of it. Just a cool, another traditional sounding metal release, an earlier one on Roadrunner, that has that funny little footnote in history. Apparently,
a footnote is a band you don't really want.
Yes, it's like the footnote of Angel Witch has. Angel Witch, I think, to this day is technically on the British record books as being the least successful charting musical act of all time, because the first Angel Witch single made it onto the chart the week it came out. It actually made it onto the charts at number 75, which was the farthest. They only counted down to 75, and on the second week it didn't make the charts at all. So it was the worst possible scenario. It got in for 1 week in last place and never got back on the chart. And so Angel Witch still has that weird designation in their history as well.
Do they have a little asterisk by that?
Yep. It's the kind of thing that, as heavy metal fans and collectors, we don't care at all about. It's just the funny little things that happen to bands sometimes. Darkheart did not deserve to be the worst selling thing on Metal Blade, but somehow it just it did not click when they put it out in this country.
Right on.
That's great.
I'm up. And for my last pick, there's some sitting here. There's more I thought could have picked. One of which is someone mentioned in the comments. Frontline Assembly. I enjoy Frontline Assembly quite a bit, which has a tie-in with this next band, but not on this album. I don't think. No. Anyway, Fear Factory. I had a minute where I liked this band quite a bit.
Yep.
Soul the New Machine was another one of those, probably one of the more popular crossover from metal to working in with more electronic industrial elements. And Fear Factory on this album did a really good job with it. I really enjoyed Burton's Seabell's vocals were the more aggressive scream with the more pitch style singing. That range of dynamics was a nice touch. This sat quite well with the style. Real modern sounding metal with electronic keyboards and stuff in the background, which they continued on with even further with this is my favorite Fear Factory album, Demanufacture. I believe Reese Fulber from Frontline Assembly plays all the keys on this. I can't read because I'm fucking blind. But yeah, I believe I know he is on further later ones for sure, but I believe this was his debut with the band. And it's just really good, aggressive, modern metal. I don't want to call it death metal. It's just really aggressive. They basically took what they started on here and amped it up. More exact, cleaner sounding, more hard hitting. Just a good mix of electronic and metal. Always sat really well with me. After this, I don't own any more Fear Factory. These are the only two I have. I'm sure there's other ones that are good. I checked out a recent one that just came out. It's boring. I don't know if the sound, they kind of were at the cutting edge of a new style, and time has kind of passed them by. I mean, that they've hung on to their sound, but I think the combination of metal and electronics has gotten a lot more commonplace. Maybe a little bit more refined over the years, and I'm a big industrial fan. Do I have a ton of industrial bands? I don't, but the ones I do have, I really enjoy. It's like metal to me. It's like metal minus the metal. It's like the aggression, the depth, the attack, with just a different wearing a different skin essentially. But yep, Fear Factory.
Yeah, to no surprise. That was another big band for me, especially Demanufacture. Played that a lot. And well, you mentioned later Fear Factory. The only one I really care about after Demanufacture is Archetype, which is the one that doesn't have Dino on it. It's actually Christian switched over to play guitar, and I think they got Byron Stroud from Strapping Young Lab on bass. That album's pretty good too. I like that one, but nothing other than that.
Right on.
Kind of boring.
Yeah, lots of friends were into Fear Factory back then. Again, old girlfriend was on Fear Factory. Her roommate was really into Fear Factory and that stuff. It wasn't my style, but that was a very popular band and a very popular style for and Roadrunner did capitalize on that really nicely at the time.
Yeah,
definitely. They're a huge band for Roadrunner.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Brian, you're up.
Okay. Cyclone's Brutal Destruction.
This guy.
I need to get that. I'm so pissed.
I have this. I got this local record store. It's only open on Fridays, and in the last couple months, he's been getting things on consignment from somebody, and it's always the same. It's always the same little sticker. So someone is selling off their metal collection, and so I'm buying it piece by piece. This popped up in there, a few months ago, and I grabbed it. Highly recommend checking this out. It's really great speed metal thrash from Belgium. High intensity. It kind of, the first couple times I listened to it, it kind of maybe thread the needle between like Bay Area and the German thrash scenes, kind of in the middle. I feel like it's just got great. I love this guy in the back. This guy with this like crew neck sweater. He's like going to Thanksgiving dinner or something.
I like the Claude Schnell lookalike guy standing next to him from the Dio keyboardist.
Oh yeah,
yep.
You got the Claude Schnell Fu Manchu going on there.
Yeah, you got to do that. You know he had a date, with a girl or something, right after this photo shoot was ending.
He's gonna hop in his rusted out Trans Am to get there.
Dude, hurry up and take the picture. I got to pick up Charlene and we're going to go see Ghostbusters.
Yeah, 86. So yeah, Ghostbusters would have been hot. I love the vocals on this. It's like, to me, it sounds a little bit like Phil Rind mixed with like the guy from Razor's got the
Sheepdog.
Yeah, he's got the Sheepdog who's got that kind of like pterodactyl screech at the end. Just really great, heavy breakneck riffing. This is a great release, great find. Happy to have it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yep.
Excellent aggressive thrash.
Yep. Yeah, it's one. It's a cool album for sure. It's one. It does sometimes feel a little. If you listen to it in the wrong mood, that one will feel a little dated. But it's still a cool album. It's a short album. It barely runs 30 minutes. So, if you're buying it, don't expect to have like an hour long epic odyssey or anything. It comes and goes real fast.
Yeah, it does not overstay its welcome.
Does not. Yep. Yeah. Brian, do you have some others that you want to wrap up with? I can shout out a few, but I don't have anything else I was going to go deep on.
I got one more I can shout out at the end.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you got a couple more you want to go.
I got one more.
Okay.
And this might win worst cover of the night. Let's find out.
Oh yeah.
There's no way. Act of God.
So stupid.
I don't know.
Shit get through the art department. I'm like, there it is, finally.
And she's got like this. She's like someone put like a spotlight on her. It's not even like a good photograph.
Asking the Magic 8 Ball, is this cover good enough?
Jeez.
Despite
the cover,
the guy that did the Whiplash album cover actually got another gig.
He did.
Wow.
He's raking it in at Roadrunner. Road Racers paid him.
Yep.
Picture this.
Grandma, hold this Magic 8 Ball. Ask it a question. We need a new album cover. But
little granny.
It's pretty good.
All signs point to yes.
This is thrash metal from Chicago. I think everybody except the vocalist went on to form Cyclone Temple. Which is probably the more popular of the two. Nicole Lee here is the vocalist. She kind of sounds like if Stevie Nicks played in a metal band. That's kind of what she sounds like to me. But yeah, really good, kind of street level, gritty thrash, decent enough production. This is my last one here. Another one I found at that store from that guy's collection.
Nice.
Yeah, it does have a pretty cool couple tracks on here. especially the last track, Something Wicked This Way Comes, kind of this like 10-minute long progressive kind of epic. A lot of different, ideas going on. Really cool solo in the middle. I'm not that familiar with Cyclone Temple, so that's one I need to dive into.
I had one of their albums back in the day, and it was okay, but it didn't stick with me very long. It quickly got traded away, and I never really felt the need to go back. Maybe I got the wrong album or something. I don't know.
It's very bluesy type of thrash.
Yeah, it did have. It had a weird sound. It had a funny title too. It was really. What the
Did it
hell
have a
was
church with like ghosts coming out of the top of the steeple?
it had like a green and yellow color.
Yeah.
And it's got
actually
kind
the
of
best of the two I have.
Yeah, it's got a convoluted title. Somebody can type it in the chat and I'll recognize it.
I can look it up real quick. I forgot I have the Oracle open.
She's also at the beach, which Drunken Metalhead pointed out.
Yep.
Don't know why she's green. He's at the beach.
I hate, therefore I am.
Yep, that's the one.
So angsty.
Yeah.
So angry.
Yep. But yeah, it didn't sound particularly angry overall, which I think just confused me even more.
Okay. Alan.
Anyway, last thing I'll shout out is, we talked about it a bit earlier, but it was such a huge part of Roadrunner's legacy. I think it deserves one more quick mention. King Diamond. We've talked some Fate. We've talked some Fatal Portrait. I do want to mention my favorite King Diamond story album, which is Abigail. Best story he ever wrote. Gorgeous cover art, which of course they all had that. They all had great musicianship, but Abigail was the cool story. A lot of people like Them better, and there's a great ghost story, but Abigail I always thought was just a really creepy tale. And those early King Diamond ghost story, concept albums, those were so big. Not just because of King's past Merciful Fate connections and his crazy voice, but that was really something different for a heavy metal band to try back then, to make this whole album into this long story and have this really spooky theme to it. Those always had a special kind of magic about them. I don't take them out and play them much anymore. I kind of got burned out on King Diamond a little bit. Nothing against him at all. I kind of wish, in a way, he had gone back and done more albums more similar to Fatal Portrait at a certain point, because I feel like the story albums, got run into the ground for a little too long. But those early ones, especially Abigail, I did not want to go the whole night and not mention that name whatsoever, because that album is just top-notch storytelling.
It's great. You can't go wrong with the first 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can't go wrong with the first 5 King Diamond albums, really.
That's about right. Yeah.
I really like the story on The Eye too. I think The Eye is a great record. The
Eye's kind of cool. It's got 3 mini stories or something.
No, that's the one that's centered on the necklace and the witch. They go back in time where the church is like the nuns.
That's what.
Yeah.
They kind of follow it through time. So it's like different chapters but spread out. Yeah, that's why.
Like the Graveyard. The Graveyard is kind of an overlooked one too. It's
not bad.
Twisted storyline, but it's a pretty good album.
Yeah, it's not bad. Haven't heard it in a while. But I'll wrap up with the King Diamond shout out. And I want to see what Marty's last one is. I've got a guess. I want to see if it's right.
This is just the one I pulled it. I was going to talk about it earlier. This album really never had a big impact on me, but I did enjoy it and listen to it, mainly because of Sepultura and it's Ratos de Paraus, Brazil.
Oh,
basically Roadrunner picked up another Brazilian band because obviously the success of Sepultura. This album is very much a Brazilian hardcore album with a bit of a metal tinge. It's kind of a aggressive, unique sounding crossover album. It's pretty aggressive. It's just excellent. Like I said, it never really blew me away, but I did listen to it. The album that came out after it, Narcophobia, I like this one better, but they're a good solid band. I believe they have a history more than just the 2 Roadrunner. I think they had stuff out before and after that, this, but good stuff. It was worth mentioning. Kind of unique in the, again, Roadrunner early on, they're kind of fearless. Of course, they had some successful bands, so they had money to experiment and try new things. Which again, if you go through and look up on Discogs, the true Roadrunner discography, it's a lot of big bands, a lot of crazy stylistic shifts. You know, you could tell they had money to play with, which from a label standpoint, that must be nice. But a lot of garbage. Holy shit. If Brian said I only want to deal with 2000 forward era Roadrunner, I wouldn't be able to participate. I'd be sitting here watching. I know there's some of you folks in here that were waiting for the 2000s to drop, and
sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brian could have hung in that because he's a lot younger than me and Alan, but
not much. I don't have
younger.
much.
But it just isn't my scene. It isn't a style I connected with. I came from the thrash and moved into the death metal era, and I was doing a zine, and writing for a bigger magazine during the late 90s heading into the 2000s, and a lot of the stuff that came in promo from Roadrunner was garbage.
Yeah, they actually put out a lot of duds.
But it appeals to a wider audience, which again, I can't poo-poo that. That's totally cool, and I get it. I get why some of these bands are popular. It's just not my thing. Yeah,
it's a different generation's music in a way.
Definitely.
Yep. And Marty, I missed. I thought you were going to pick Dawn of Possession.
We're getting a lot of heat for not bringing Dawn of Possession.
You know what? I didn't realize that was on Roadrunner or Road
It's an RC. It was on RC.
How did I miss that?
I left it off.
Classic. I mean, I'm seeing it now in the chat. Yeah. People are saying, "What the hell?" But
it was. I got a song on this compilation. Does that count?
There you go.
I don't.
It's a classic album.
Oh, absolutely.
Completely timeless, classic death metal album.
I kind of left it off because I figured it was an obvious one. I thought someone else would actually bring it.
I totally didn't even cross my mind. I totally skipped over it, grabbing other stuff. Totally missed it. So
and that's going to be the thing. There's always going to be stuff that we miss on these kind of things. And it can be, going back to our starting point, it can be very tricky keeping up with all the different little sub-labels. I went through the 80s and 90s Roadrunner discography really, really closely. And if Immolation was on the list I was looking at, I completely glanced over it, but I don't think it was on. I think I would have noted it.
I think they were on. I think Dawn of Possession came out on Roadrunner, and then they switched to Metal Blade after that.
See, I was thinking Metal Blade, and like I said, I picked out the stuff that was obvious to me, and then I went through the Discogs list. There's like 300 and some pages of Roadrunner releases. I started at the beginning, and then I skimmed the last few pages. I'm like, fuck this. I am not going through all this garbage because it is garbage. There is so much.
Oh,
garbage.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you get into these big labels like this and Century Media, and then you get to a certain point where they're reissuing their own stuff, and so you just keep seeing the same titles every 2 or 3 pages. And after a while, your eyes just start to go cross, and it becomes easy to miss things. But there are other things that we missed. There's a lot of things that again they put out that were really good, but they were technically licensing them from someone else. I wanted to mention the second Virgin Steel album is great, but that was technically a Mongol Horde release. Jack Starr's first self-titled album, Out of the Darkness, is great, but that was technically licensed from Passport Records. So there's so many little weird corner cases that you're going to miss something every time. But I think we hit a lot of the big bases, and it's been a really fun topic to dive through tonight. So, Brian, excellent choice.
Awesome, people are mentioning Typo Negative. I mean, that's an obvious one. And
exactly.
Back in the, I got a promo of October Rust, and I really enjoyed it. And that I think that just always struck me as like a Metalhead's Barry White album. And then it wasn't until I read Jeff Wagner's book on Pete Steele that I went and bought all of the Typo Negative albums, and then I really started to appreciate them. And now I like them, but I tried to pick shit that it was, I cut my teeth on in the formative years more so than modern. Simon mentioned Defiance. I ended up getting Void Terra Firma on cassette back in the day, and that was kind of late era thrash for me, and they always struck me as wore out. They sounded very wore out. The Product of Society was their first album, and a little bit better, but man, Void Terra Firma, I just was not interested. I wanted death metal at that point. They came in late in the game. You know?
Yeah, I had both the albums, and no disrespect to Simon at all. He's a very cool guy, but Defiance to me has always been the definition of generic thrash band. Neither of those albums ever. I couldn't tell you a single song or a single note from either of them, even though I owned both of them for years. I
still have both of them, and I
let them go
once in a while and go, I don't know.
Yeah, and for me, it's those two are again out of print. I can't find a copy. I definitely, if I would have had a, Product Society, I would have been on the list, definitely.
Yeah, they're hard things to find. One that I know Simon picked up not long ago, but we didn't mention tonight, Infernal Majesty, None Shall Defy. That's
yeah.
Oh, shit, that's a classic. That's such a good album.
Yep. Yeah. So, it's impossible to cover them all in one night. Yep. But hopefully folks have had fun. There's been a ton of good discussion over in the chat. Thanks to folks so much for participating and throwing out stuff and helping catch some of the balls that we're dropping here.
Right. But thank you, folks, again. Brian, thank you for hanging out with us, bringing this topic to us. A lot of fun. It was good hanging with you, man.
Yeah, it was a blast. I really appreciate the opportunity to get on here and talk some metal with you guys.
Yep. Everybody go check out Brian's channel when you get a chance. If you got some time to kill this weekend and you're looking for something to watch,
if you Brian get some Arkham time,
he's always got.
I do my best watching.
And also,
Brian's always got cool stuff to show in his videos.
He does.
But yes,
Alan's Let's Talk Metal channel definitely needs more subscribers too. I got his link in the description as well. And if you're watching this stuff, we're trying to post every week. If you want to get notifications, subscribe. I hate to be that guy, but you want to find out about it, subscribe. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Next week, we need to note we're making one change. My band has to practice Friday night, so we're moving to Saturday night. We're going to be on at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to try to get on before the Satterslay crew. Should we announce our guests so people know?
Yeah, I think we've got this one cemented in place already, so I think it's okay to do a reveal. So yes, next Saturday night, Marty's channel as usual, but 7 p.m. Saturday night.
Yep.
And Marty, do the honors.
We've got Hunter Ginn from Canvas Solaris and Radical Research coming on. We're going to be talking about overlooked 90s classics. Is that right? Is that the topic?
That is the topic, and Hunter's already got a really interesting list put together, so it should be a great discussion. Looking forward to talking to him about the Canvas Solaris had an album count earlier this year, and so we'll hear about that. He's got some other, I think, projects in the works too, so we'll find out what he's been up to and see how things are going with him and Jeff over at the Radical Research podcast.
Yes, which is another thing you guys should check out. If you have not checked out Radical Research, they are not on YouTube. They are a traditional podcast. Go on your Podbean or your iTunes or whatever the hell you check out podcasts on and look up Radical Research. They do deep dives on topics. They do a great job. Awesome dudes.
Yeah.
They do a great job with what they do. And then after that Saturday, we are going back to Friday nights. It's just a one-off deal until further notice. I thought we were going to have to switch to Saturdays, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So
we'll take it as it goes.
We'll take it as it comes. But we appreciate all you folks for watching. Again, Brian, thank you. And we're going to jump. Have a good Friday night and a great weekend, everybody.
Everybody take care.
Thanks so much
for watching.